Mayor, the first item, we have approval of the minutes of October the 18th.
Okay, approval of the minutes of October 18th. Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Hickey on the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Thank you. Next item.
Mayor, next item is approval of the agenda, and we have 3 additions. 17.1 would be for land acquisition at 195 Sydney. 17.2, a memorandum of understanding with Cook Aquaculture. And 17.3, appointments to committees.
All right, can I get a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of those 17 items, please? Councillor Lowe, Councillor Radwan, on the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Next item.
Next is disclosures of conflict of interest.
Okay, I don't see any disclosures of conflict of interest. Next item.
Next item, Your Worship, is the consent agenda.
Deputy, over to you, please.
Thank you, Worship. I would move 5.1 through to 5.6, please.
I get a seconder on that. Councillor Hickey on the questions. Okay, I have a few questions. Let's see here. I'll get my list out. Councillor Radwan, you are up first.
Thank you, Mayor Rudin. I just wanted to make a quick comment. So 5.6, the BIA. We're no longer, my business is no longer a part of Uptown St. John, but I just want to speak to how essential this was for my business in the last 10 years. Uptown St. John has done an incredible job of marketing and beautifying the Uptown area. We have a lot of citizens that don't understand that the businesses in the Uptown core actually pay a certain percentage of their taxes to go into this BIA, which contributes to Uptown St. John. And so sometimes there's some misunderstanding as to why Uptown St. John is getting so much recognition, but the businesses are putting money out there for this, and they've done an incredible job. And I'd just like to send a special thank you to Nancy Tissington and her crew for all of the work that they do, because it's so crucial to our Uptown core.
Thank you, Councillor. You're correct. It's 16 cents on every $100 of assessment. That's your privilege to, to pay over and above your taxes. But was very nice. Thank you so much. Okay, up next I have Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just comments on the city's Race to Zero pledge that is before us tonight in the consent agenda. I think it's just worth mentioning that in the past there have been missed opportunities in the city that have meant that the citizens have suffered. We've missed out on economic opportunities. We've missed out on transitionary opportunities for the economy. And tonight we look to adopt this city's Race to Zero pledge, which makes us the only city in New Brunswick to do so. Certainly the first. There's many that are talking, and I've had conversations with some of them even just today about this, and only the second in Atlantic Canada. And by doing so, we are aligning ourselves with the strategic direction of decarbonizing our society and moving to more sustainable modes of energy production, transportation, and overall lifestyles. This means we're giving staff, by taking this pledge, we're giving staff and this city, by extension, the best opportunity to receive outside funding, an investment to deliver on these well-developed plans to decarbonize and increase efficiency in our city, corporate structure, and in our community. The province of New Brunswick has been reluctant to truly act on climate change action, which has resulted in delays we can't afford. With this pledge and our plans in place for the next decade to hit real targets, the province and federal government can confidently invest in our industrial city, and they know that we will deliver on impact for greenhouse gas reductions and mitigations. And so I just want to thank the work of staff behind the scenes to look into this and to really measure what its outcomes will be. Certainly to Commissioner McGovern and Director Samir for their work. And going forward, I hope this council and our city manager will prioritize expanding the capacity of our department and with resources we need to continue to be leaders on climate action in New Brunswick. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Commissioner McGovern, did you want to say a word or two on this? I know we have been, the city of St. John has been out ahead of climate change. I would say myself, considering in 2019, we adopted a couple of the climate change adaptation plans. So, you know, this complements it, I guess, but if you wanted to say a few little words, I'm happy to put you up there for a few minutes.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think Councillor Harris covered it off, but maybe just in quick, a few quick notes. The pledge to join, as mentioned, really complements the work that is already planned by Council, particularly Council's newly adopted green priority. And it also aligns well with the city's climate change action plan, Move SJ, and our asset management policy, which also speaks to the importance of considering climate change in any infrastructure investments. And so it is a step in the right direction. It does allow Council to show leadership and further leadership and environmental stewardship in this area. And as you mentioned, Your Worship, Samir Yamin, Director, responsible for climate change and energy management, has done some significant work in this area, and he's here with us tonight joining us. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. As he has done some fantastic work. I've witnessed it myself over the last 9 years. I always love to see his name on the agenda. Councillor Hickey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just specific to 5.6, the BIA's budget as the city's rep on the Uptown St. John. Very exciting to have this come to fruition. Just wanted to highlight the work of the team there, and certainly their efforts in continuing to support the businesses in the Uptown. And I guess I'll wait and mention Chop Chop and my members' comments. So thank you very much, Your Worship.
Sounds good. Yes, I will I'll piggyback on that as well. I was on Uptown St. John for a lot of years, and they have done a lot of work in the Uptown area, and it's been great. And a lot of their initiatives that they've incubated have really grown and taken on some legs, and you're going to talk about Chop Chop later. So if there are no other questions, I will call the question on the consent agenda items, and item 5.1 to 5.6. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Thank you, everyone. Next item, Common Clerk.
Your Worship, just wanted to verify we had a mover and seconder for the consent agenda.
Yeah, we had the deputy. And then
Okay.
Was it Hickey? Was it you, Councillor Hickey? I thought we had you.
Okay, and next item, Your Worship, number 6, members' comments.
Okay.
Members' comments. Councillor Harris? No? Okay, sorry, your hand is up there. Councillor Hickey? Are you up?
Sure, I can go, Your Worship.
Okay.
Just wanted to mention, like I said before, it's Chop Chop this week, so be sure to check out your favorite restaurants. Certainly, I'm, Chop Chop is limited to the Uptown, but don't forget the rest of them in St. John too. But a great week to check those ones out. Further to that, it was quite a weekend at the city market. As they hosted Halloween, and trick-or-treaters were able to check out all of the different city market vendors and shops to be able to get some treats. I was also able to briefly volunteer at the pumpkin carving station, which was great. I'm not prepared to see any pumpkins in the near future, so I'm glad I have a year to wait. Also just wanted to mention, folks, as the Legion kicks off their 2021 poppy campaign, certainly, Your Worship, you were the first to receive a poppy in St. John, but reminder to everyone to be sure to get theirs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hickey. Good reminder. Okay, we'll go over to, did you say, Councillor Hickey? So Councillor Radwan's up next.
Thank you, Mayor. And gosh, I keep forgetting to unmute. So I just, I was actually going to say a little bit of the same, actually, because it's a bittersweet week for me. It's the first year that my business hasn't participated in Chop Chop in 10 years. But I have to tell you, it's so important to support our local restaurants uptown. And I did want to make mention to, you know, to make sure that people know that our city market vendors are also usually participating in Chop Chop. So check out Uptown St. John's website and take a look at Chop Chop. I decided to kind of switch things over for my members' comments. And these are things that, I mean, obviously I could be sending emails on, but just for the sake of transparency, I've had a lot of our constituents asking me about pending reports. One of those, for example, being the water consultants report. So I'm just going to be kind of just throwing that out there. It's not something that I'm looking for a response today, obviously, but hoping to see something in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Radwan. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Your Worship. A few things, actually. If I lean in really close to the camera, you might be able to see that I'm trying to catch up to Councillors Hickey and Stewart and Harris, McKenzie. Oh, maybe a challenge out to Councillors Ogden and Norton. It is Movember, which is the 1 month of the year my family allows me to grow such a wonderful warmth on my upper lip. But in all seriousness, and really importantly, I've done it for a long time as a supporter of the Movember cause for men's health. If you go online and look up Movember, you can donate money to the cause, and really it focuses on 3 areas of men's health: mental health, testicular cancer, and prostate cancer. So some really important things that the men in your life should be aware of. I've certainly made my son aware, and so hopefully this month people take some time to donate to the cause, or at least educate themselves about the cause. And we'll see how we'll check in on this in a couple of weeks. Second, thanks to Sally Cummings and the crew over at Rockmora. My family had an opportunity to take part in their fundraiser this past weekend at Thistle St. Andrews Curling Club. And we don't have these many opportunities as we used to, certainly living in the COVID world. They made sure we were safe and everything was looked after, but it was kind of a nice bit of normalcy to go and see people donating to a good cause. So thanks to all those folks and everybody who donated. It's been such a long time since I've been to a live auction and fundraiser like that. So hopefully, as I lead into my third point, we can do more of it. And of course, the third point is we want to do more of it. We've got to keep battling this COVID coronavirus pandemic. And we know we're tired. We still have to wear our masks. We still have to socially distance. We still have to sneeze into our elbows and all those things. Make sure we're kind to each other. But this is a beautiful time of the year to get out. It is very good for your mental health, and you can take your mask off when you're walking in the forest. If you want to go visit Rockwood Park or take a walk along Harbor Passage and look at the beautiful Bay of Fundy, or maybe a little too cold for swimming, but a great time of year to take a stroll along one of our city beaches. Really good for your mental health. You can take your mask off and breathe some fresh air before you're back inside, remembering everything else. So be kind to one another. Make sure you're wearing your masks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Good advice. Councillor Killen, over to you.
Thank you. I mean, David and Councillor Hickey and Councillor Radwan talking about the market and everything that went on this weekend is stole my words a little bit, but I have to reiterate how wonderful the Halloween event was. I think the world, everything that's going on right now is a lot right now. We're in a time of change. We're at a time of, critical differences. So I just wanted to use my time here to talk about just how important it is to take care of ourselves. Things are stressful. Things are, tumultuous. So just from one person to another in this community, I just want everyone to know that I'm here for you. I completely am open about mental health struggles and things like that, and things are very difficult right now. So my heart is with you. I just felt the need to sort of share that tonight. We're seeing a lot. There's a lot going on. So I really appreciate everyone who's out there trying to figure out their way forward for themselves. And yeah, I know St. John is a loving and supportive community. So I just wanted the folks out there who might be listening to know that we as a council are supportive of everyone's happiness and thriving in this city. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Killen. Nice message. So I'll just wrap it up, and I will say that one of the most wonderful things, of course, of being part of the leadership of the city is that you get to meet so many great people and you attend so many wonderful events. And so on Thursday, I went to the Candlelight Memorial ode at Cedar Hill at the Field of Honor. That was on Thursday night. I had to sneak out of Finance Committee a few minutes early. And then on Friday, I got to raise the flag for the Poppy campaign. And that's an important fundraiser for them. And it's run by the volunteers that are in all the legions across the country, over 1,400 legions. So it's very important. And it's a very nice, I find it's a very personal and very visible way for you to support your veterans and to remember those who have sacrificed for our freedom. So it's a great campaign. Chop Chop, just remember, it's not only fun and tasty, but every plate that's sold, $1 goes to down here to support the Children for a Lunch program. So that's very important. And this week, I ripped over to Coverdale because they had their open house for the new space over there, and it's very nice. And they'll be able to take on, I think, another 10 women over there. So that's important as well. Anyway, so that's a little bit of a wrap up for the week. And thank you everyone for the update from the community. All right, Common Clerk, the next item, please.
Your Worship, next we have the public hearing, but it's not quite 6:30 yet. So I would suggest we go to some of the quicker items to deal with. We could move over to general correspondence if you're okay with that.
Sure. All right. So,
okay, so we have under general correspondence as 15.1 on your agenda. There's a letter from Province of New Brunswick with respect to ministerial letter to mayors and councils on COVID-19. And there's a staff recommendation to refer this to the city manager and the public safety.
Okay, so you've seen that letter, it's in the kit. Are you moving that? And Councillor Radwan, okay. On the question, all in favor? Contrary minded, motion carried. Okay, 15-1. All right,
next, Your Worship, is 15.2. This is a request to purchase tickets to YMCA Red Triangle Award. Staff recommendation is to approve request and refer to Common Clerk's office.
Okay, thank you. So that request will go to the Common Clerk's office. Councillor Radwan is moving that, and Councillor Harris seconding it. So anyone who would like a ticket can go over there to the clerk's office and get a ticket. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Okay. All right.
And so next would be items that were added from Committee of the Whole. And the first item is 17.1. And this was a recommendation from Committee of the Whole with regard to land acquisition at 195 Sydney Street.
Okay.
And I can read the recommendation quickly. It's that the city purchase parcel of land at 195 Sydney, identified as PID number 0002238 and 0001917 from 692584 NB Inc. in accordance with terms and conditions attached to a purchase and sale agreement presented to Committee of the Whole on November 1, 2021, that the purchase price for the land transaction be paid out of the Strategic Real Estate Capital Reserve, and should said parcel of land be sold by the city, that the proceeds of the sale be placed in the Strategic Real Estate Capital Reserve.
Okay, I need a mover. Councillor McKenzie, and I have Councillor Harris on the question. All in favor? Once reminded, motion carried. Next item, please.
Next is 17.2, another recommendation from Committee of the Whole. It's with respect to a memorandum of understanding with Cook Aquaculture, and it's that the city enter into a memorandum of understanding in the form as presented to Committee of the Whole on November 1, 2021, with Cook Aquaculture Inc. regarding a potential land transaction, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the memorandum of understanding.
Thank you. I need a motion. Councillor Radwan, seconder, Councillor Ogden on the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Thank you. Next item.
And the final recommendation from Committee of the Whole is with respect to appointments to committees. And this is with respect to the City Market Strategic Plan Steering Committee. And it's to appoint Michael Forrestel, Melanie Colpitz, Christy Stelling, and Andrew McPherson, as well as Mayor Reardon and Councillor Lowe from today's date until the strategic plan is complete.
Okay, I need a mover for that. And I need Councillor Stewart, Councillor and the deputy on the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. All right, thank you. Okay, City Clerk, next item.
So we have about 2 minutes left.
Okay. What about
until
number
6:30.
Your worship,
Yeah,
as the city manager, I don't believe anything else we can do it justice in the time that's remaining. I recommend we just do a pause in place until 6:30 and commence the public hearings.
Okay. All right. Okay, I have my iPad on the go. I have my handwritten notes on the go. So it seems
So-
it's
Your worship, if I may, to the members of the public who have now joined this council meeting, just so that the mayor is able to adequately manage the meeting and understand who's in the queue to speak, etc., we would ask a couple things of you. First of all, that when you are not speaking, that you keep your camera off. So that way the visuals that we have on our screens are those of the councillors. So again, keep your cameras off when not speaking. Turn and also remain muted until asked to speak. When you are asked if anyone wishes to speak, if you wish to speak, then we do recommend that you use the hand feature on the system. If you do not know how to use the hand feature, not a problem. Simply turn on your camera and wave, and that will catch the mayor's attention at that point in time. So again, cameras off, please. Microphones off, please, and only turn them on when you are called upon to speak. Thank you very much.
right. It looks like it's 6:30. City Clerk.
Yes, Mayor. So it's now 6:30, and we've advertised public hearings to begin at this time. So on item 9.1 on council's agenda, we have a public hearing scheduled, and this is for a proposed zoning bylaw amendment with a PAC report recommending the rezoning at 54 Broad Street. We do have one speaker who has registered to speak tonight, and the commissioner of the department, Commissioner Hamilton, will provide a brief overview before we begin the public.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Hamilton, over to you, please.
Yes, good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Before you for this evening for public hearing is a proposed rezoning application, which was submitted by Matt Carr for a property located at 54 Broad Street. And this is the location of the former St. John the Baptist Rectory building. The proposal involves a residential conversion of the rectory to create 5 residential units. The application, which would see the property rezoned from neighborhood community facility to urban center residential, has been considered by the Planning Advisory Committee, and it has received their unanimous recommendation of approval. Before you are recommendations from staff and the committee, which are aligned to approve the rezoning with conditions. And I understand that a representative from the applicant is in attendance to participate as part of tonight's public hearing. And while there's no staff presentation this evening, Jennifer Kirchner, who's our manager of community planning, is available to respond to questions of council. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you. Okay, so I will open the public hearing and we'll start in our usual manner. And I will ask if there is anyone online who would like to speak against the application. Is there anyone online who would like to speak against the application? And I'll ask again if there's anyone who would like to speak against the application. Okay, is there anyone who would like to speak for the application? Mr. Carr, do I have you in the audience?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
So I'll get you to just for formal, just to give us your name, et cetera, and what your involvement is in the project, if you don't mind.
Sure. My name is Matthew Carr. So I am the purchaser of 54 Broad Street. The closing date is later in November, and I have a small presentation to speak to, if that's okay. Share content here. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm excited to talk about the rectory at 54 Broad Street tonight. The rectory is, as you probably know, was built in the late 1800s, 1884, in conjunction with the church next door, which is being converted to Climb 1884. So I'm excited to be a part of that collaboration as well with regards to resculpturing the southwest corner of that intersection. So the intent is to bring new life to this vacant building of almost 15 years. It's really exciting to be a part of the architecture. I actually have a background in architecture and design as well. So when I visited the building in the summer, I was completely thrown back by the character and the quality of the build of the building. So I'm looking forward to reinterpret that and keep as many details as possible into the structure, all within the existing envelope of the building. So we're looking to create 5 well-built and safe suites hopefully by fall 2022, if everything cooperates. And it's been great so far, integrating in with the community and collaborating with locals. And obviously that will continue with regards to the building and hiring out trades, et cetera, for the property. The lot size is just over 17,000 square feet, and it actually encompasses 3 legal PIDs. I'll show that in the next slide here. So we have the property at the front here, which is 100 by 100, and then the 2 back properties, which are joined together. Of each one of these are 33 by 100. And considering parking as well, so we have 4 spots in 2 possible locations. So just to the west of the building here, we can have a spot for 4 here. There is an existing garage here with a 2-car garage. And the second option is actually to build parking in behind the garage. Either way, I'd be very conscious of being discreet to the street, adding some vegetation in the front here or landscaping to hide the cars and make sure that everything is kind of preserved with regards to the landscape and the scale of the building. There are some beautiful mature trees in the front and in the back as well, which will not be touched in any way with regards to any sorts of building or conversions of the building. And actually looking to add a common space in the back here for the residents to enjoy on the south side of the building. So here's some more elevation shots here. So the back view, so this is what I was speaking to with regards to a common area in the back for the tenants. And the exterior preservation, as I said, the building's in pretty good shape on the outside. So it's just going to be some minor work to be done, and any improvements to the roof and the eaves. Exits will obviously have to be considered to land within fire code, and windows and doors will be tastefully upgraded and preserving as many of the original details as possible. The interior alterations, so you can see here the main floor will have 2 units, the second floor will have 2 units, and the third floor has space for 1 unit, all ranging between 1-bedroom suites and 2 2-bedroom suites. The common areas, so it actually fits, the architecture of the building actually fits quite well with regards to planning out the apartment layout. So this common area here, I want to keep as the common entry, which is a stunning staircase that goes right up to the 3rd floor, and all the entrances to the apartments will be off of this large staircase. Fire protection, bringing everything up to code. We've already had inspectors through there, so a lot of cooperation and collaboration there. And all the electrical, plumbing, heating, cooling, that will all be upgraded and being as eco and efficient as possible with those upgrades. And there's a basement as well, and that will be turned into storage for the residents. Interior alterations, as you can see, like there's just so many stunning details in this building, so I'm looking forward to keep these intact. Kitchens will be upgraded and using high quality materials that will stand the test of time. Washrooms in the similar fashion, so all the units will kind of be brought together using the same kind of palette. Lighting, where we can use LED lighting to reduce energy costs to make things as efficient as possible. And St. John, I was introduced to St. John by a friend, Judith Macklin, who has a store in Uptown called Tuck Studio. She actually sells product that I create at Umbra, which is a product design company. And I went over there this summer. I've been looking at properties for just over a year now in St. John, and this property definitely kind of hit all the spots with regards to possible contribution to the city, the architecture, obviously, of the building. And once I heard that Climb 1884 was going on next door as well, it just kind of brought everything harmoniously together. So looking forward to the project.
Mr. Carr, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Carr? All right, hang on, stay on the line there.
Okay.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm just going to ask a couple of more times if anyone is here that wants to speak in favor of the project. If there's anyone online that would like to speak in favor of this project.
Sorry, Mayor, there's a couple of councillors who have their hands up for comments.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a question for Mr. Carr. I thank you for your engagement on this property 3 years ago when I was living in the South End and trying to work with people living there on exactly, livable apartments that we could renovate and affordable housing stuff. This was one that was flagged, but it had quite an extensive amount of damage and water damage in the basement area, which yeah. I'm sure you're aware of, but I know you've got the I know you would have the expertise to mitigate that and to rework that, but it's a great project. And I would just ask, and I'm sure you're aware that, on the other side of that property where the new climbing gym is going is a really important element for our city in Safe Harbor, and with youth and homelessness and all the things that come around that. So it's a great location for what you're doing. I just, again, as an advocate for the city, and Judith Macklin's a great advocate and a great ambassador for the city of St. John, would just draw your attention to them and their needs. And I'm not sure if you've reached out. I guess that would be my question, but if you have any contact with the folks at Safe Harbor.
I have not had any contact yet, but that's definitely something we can engage in for sure. And I am aware of what they stand for and what they do. So it's, I think it's going to be a really great kind of addition to that development, you know, as the south end continues to grow.
Yeah, could be a beautiful partnership. Awesome. Thank you.
Completely.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Councillor Radwan, you have a question for Mr. Carr or a comment?
I do. Thank you, Mayor Reardon. I do have a couple of quick questions and then a small comment for you, Mr. Carr. Just wondering, first of all, of course, with the older buildings, sometimes it's very challenging to have things accessible for wheelchair accessibility. Wondering if it is a possibility in this building or not?
I think there will be definitely a possibility for the first floor, definitely. And actually having 2 units on that first floor, because that's something I was considering about the unit breakdown on the floors, and having the additional unit on the main floor could be something that could be addressed for wheelchair accessibility.
Wonderful. And do you have any idea when you're finished what kind of rents that you would be, I mean, obviously the units are all different, but what kind of range in rent pricing that you would have?
Yeah, we haven't landed on an exact price yet. Obviously, that's going to take a bit of time. But what we want to do is meet what the market is asking. And I think as we are adding 5 units to the city, it will help. It will help spread things out.
Uh-oh,
Yeah.
we may have
Maybe
lost
it was just-
Mr. Carr.
Yeah, I have a quick comment too. I wanted to mention that I was just so thrilled to hear how much you wanted to try to preserve the architecture. It just looks so exquisite in there. It's so wonderful to see somebody taking on a building that's been vacant for 15 years.
Agreed.
So I'm just really excited about that, and I wish him all the best in his business adventure. But anyway, it's too bad we didn't get to hear the end there, but thank you very much for your
He may end up,
comments.
coming back on, we'll see. So I'll ask if there's anyone else that would like to speak in favor of the application. I'll ask again if anyone would like to speak in favor of the application. All right, so I'll close the public hearing. Jennifer Kirshner is available if you have any questions. So we are dealing tonight with land use planning. So if you have any questions in regards to land use planning for staff, she's here to answer them. And if you don't, I will take a motion to, okay. Mr. Gunnar here, he's coming back. Jerry, Councillor Lowe and Councillor Harris. Okay, so we've got a motion on the floor to support staff MPAC recommendations with this. So I will call the question, and on question, all in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Mr. Carr, you're back with us?
I am.
Okay, good. Congratulations. You guys just got your zoning.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
It's a wonderful project. I moved to St. John in '84 and attended that church in '85 till it closed. So I'm familiar with that building and the church.
That's great.
It's wonderful to see it be reimagined. So thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a familiar story. Everybody has some interaction with it, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you all.
Thanks. All right, bye now.
Have a great evening.
All right, City Clerk, next item.
So your worship, in this case, we needed readings by title twice. So we did already get a motion from you. So I can read out the title, and then we'll need one more reading by title. So this is a law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Okay, so now I'll need a second reading by title. Motion for a second. Councillor Harrison, the deputy. On the question, all in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Over to you, Common Clerk.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Thank you. All right, next item.
Next, your worship, we have one more public hearing. This is item 9.2 on your agenda. And this public hearing is for a proposed zoning bylaw amendment with a PAC recommendation for rezoning and a staff presentation at 573 Woodward Avenue. I would note that there are a number of guests that have signed up to speak. We have 6 registered speakers and a late addition as well. So we have a total of 7. The Commissioner of Growth and Development, Commissioner Hamilton, will provide a brief overview.
All right, Commissioner Hamilton, over to you, please.
Yes, Your Worship, members of council, before you for this evening for public hearing is a proposed rezoning application. It was submitted by NJP Developments Incorporated for a property located at 573 Woodward Avenue. The proposal involves the development of 3 apartment buildings for a total of 225 residential units. The application, which involves a rezoning from the low-rise to mid-rise residential zone, has been considered by the Planning Advisory Committee and has received their unanimous recommendation for approval. And before you are recommendations from staff and the committee, which are aligned to approve the rezoning with conditions. Staff have prepared, it's in your package, a supplemental report which addresses concerns that were raised by members of the public during the committee deliberations, and are prepared this evening to give you a brief presentation on the file and the recommendations before you. And with that as an introduction, I will turn it over to Mark O'Hearn, planner from our community planning team, to deliver tonight's presentation. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. O'Hearn, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. This public hearing deals with a rezoning and a Section 59 amendment application for the property at 573 Woodward Avenue. In 2018, Common Council approved the rezoning of this property to allow, excuse me, Your Worship, is the, I don't seem to have the presentation up anymore.
Yeah, we've lost your slides. Just get out and get back in and try to share your screen again, please, Mr. O'Hearn.
Okay.
You're back up.
In 2018, Common Council approved the rezoning of the property to allow for the construction of 2 24-unit multiple residential buildings and 21 semi-detached buildings on this property. Common Council imposed 6 Section 59 conditions, which were recommended by staff and the Planning Advisory Committee. The applicant has indicated that a higher density development is needed in order to offset the cost to develop this property. A revised proposal featuring 3 larger multi-residential buildings is now being proposed. Should this application be approved, the applicant will proceed with a subdivision application for the approval of a new street off Woodward Avenue. The applicant intends to begin construction of the 50-unit building, the building furthest to the left in this rendering, next year. The subject property is located in Milledgeville, to the southeast of the intersection of Woodward Avenue, Boar's Head Road, and Raggett Point Road. The property is approximately 3.5 hectares in area and has an elevated, hilly, rocky terrain. There are 18 properties with single detached housing adjacent to the subject property. The property is designated stable residential by the municipal plan. The municipal plan requires that a rezoning process be undertaken when significant new development is proposed. The property is currently split zoned low-rise residential RL and mid-rise residential RM. In order to proceed with the revised development proposal, the western portion of the property must be rezoned to mid-rise residential. The report includes a careful review of the relevant municipal plan policies concerning this application. For the reasons stated in the report, it is staff's position that the municipal plan is supportive of the revised proposal. With regards to engagement, the applicant delivered information about the proposed development to residents on October the 7th and responded to 3 inquiries. The public notice for the application was placed on the city's website on October the 7th. Letters were sent to all property owners within 100 meters of the property on October the 8th, and 7 emails were received from the public concerning this application. As mentioned by Jacqueline, both staff and PAC recommend that Common Council approve the application with Section 59 conditions that will limit the development to a maximum of 225 dwelling units, ensure that no building is closer than 45 meters from an adjacent residential property, that no building is constructed higher than 14 meters, that a continuous vegetative buffer having a minimum width of 12 meters is installed along the perimeter of the property, that the property is developed in accordance with city-approved site and landscaping plans, that these plans are attached to permits and the work completed within 1 year, that the buildings are designed in accordance with city-approved elevation plans, that the property is developed in accordance with a city-approved stormwater drainage plan and design report, that a traffic impact statement is required, and that all work, utilities, and other facilities be the sole responsibility of the proponent. A supplemental report has been included in your package to provide council with additional information about 8 concerns that were raised at the PAC meeting by local residents. Your worship, that concludes the staff presentation. Joining me this evening is the city traffic engineer, Tim O'Reilly, to answer questions related to traffic, and Joel Landers to answer questions related to infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Hearn. So the procedure is I'll open up the public hearing. We'll hear from anyone who wants to speak against or for the application, and then we will go to staff for questions. So I'm assuming that's all correct, City Clerk? So we'll just proceed. So go ahead, sorry.
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay.
Yes, and could I suggest we had members register with our office, so I have a list that we could do in order of those members of the public who have registered. And I see them on the line, so I'll start with the first member to register to speak in opposition would be Ray Neighbor.
Okay.
We ask Ray to unmute and turn on your camera.
Have you got me?
I can hear you, Mr. Maber. Oh, there you are. We see you.
Okay.
And we can
Great.
hear you, Mr. Maber. You've got the floor.
Richard, first of all, I do want to say that I am not opposed to the development. I think it's an excellent use of the property. The only thing that I am concerned with would be the development immediately behind me, which would include that road, that new city street that was running from the immediate Woodward Avenue area across the north side of the development and over to the far eastern side of the development. It simply seemed to me that it would be a more appropriate way to bring a street in from Woodward, partially feeding the subdivision, and another one in off of the Charlie Grace area, partially feeding the subdivision. My only concern.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Maber. Then, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Maber? All right. I guess we don't have any questions for you. Oh, we do have a couple of questions for you, Mr. Maber. Hold on.
Okay.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question. Mr. Maber, have you received any communication from the traffic engineer as to why they chose that route?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I have spoken with the fire department, and they suggested that I should speak to the traffic engineer. but it was on a short-term notice and I have not done so.
Right. And so the traffic engineer is on here. I hope we'll be able to get Director Tim O'Reilly to speak to that. I guess my observation just as a counselor is that in many situations, there are mandatory minimums and code requirements, either from a traffic perspective or from a building perspective, that need to be achieved. And it's really hard to weigh in with our preferences on where things go when we have legal requirements. So anyway, it's just something I've observed over the years. And I'm hopeful that Director Tim my short term on council, but the paying attention to council over the years, I guess. So I guess we'll just wait for Director Tim in the staff question section to respond.
Director O'Reilly he will be available to answer those questions for us.
And just to ensure you, I am aware that those sorts of things are required.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Councillor Redwan, did you have a question for Mr. Maber?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Rudin. I just wanted to ask you, Mr. Maber, first of all, I'm just wondering exactly where your address is, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
501 Boar's Head Road.
Okay, and I'm just wondering if your concern about the entryway, is it more of a concern about traffic or safety?
Oh, neither. It is just a disruption of the back line of the property. The new street would be approximately, I don't remember the exact number, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 35 feet away from my back property line. I suspect it would end up being elevated, which would probably put the majority of the traffic lights, the vehicle headlights, coming into our bedroom windows.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And if that is the only requirement to put the subdivision together, I'm sure we can come up with something that would alleviate my concern. But looking at that drawing, it seemed to me to be a lot more efficient if be coming in from two different sides of the street. But we'll talk to the engineer about that and see what he says.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Maber. All right, Common Clerk, who do you have registered next to speak in opposition to the application?
Your Worship, now we have Mike Kane that has registered, and I do see Mr. Kane online here, so we'll ask him to unmute and turn on the camera.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
I can hear you, Mr. Kane. I don't see you, but I can hear you.
There's no camera, sorry about that. I'm on a desktop, not a laptop.
All right, you've got the floor.
Yes, I'm just going to share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay. I live at 495 Boar's Head Road, right next door to Mr. Maber at 501. And just to touch on what he was saying, as you can see with the arrows, the three parking lots will basically shine right in the back of our houses on their way out. And the amount of units that is about to be behind us is the equivalent of all of Cedar Point, if you count all the houses out there. So it's not a small amount of vehicles and houses and pedestrians, etc. I'm not like Ray. I'm not against the thing. I'm more about what can be done to protect the existing property's privacy. My other main concern is the back of my lot. You can see right there, the property line is mere feet from the back of my house. So I'll be cut off from the back of my property for maintenance and access. I've already had problems like trying to get building permits to tear down that deck once I realized it was over the line from the previous owner. And I was unable to get a permit to even put back stairs in to get out of my house because I'm too close to the line. I noticed in the bylaw that there's a section here for developers that they can extend people's properties adjacent to a new development so that we have the proper setbacks. That's what I'm asking for. I think there's about 18 houses affected. Myself and Mr. Maber's house are the only two who are under the setback requirements, I'm really close to the line, like about 3 feet. So anyways, those are my big concerns. Thanks.
All right, Mr. Kane, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Kane? All right, Mr. Kane, looks like there's no questions for you right now, but we'll be able to deal with staff at the end of the presentation. City Clerk, do you have another person registered to speak against the proposal?
I do, Your Worship. Yes, next person that has registered is Debbie McCormick. I ask Debbie to unmute and turn on a camera if you have a video cam.
Okay, yes.
Hello, Debbie, you've got the floor.
Hi, good evening, Your Worship. So I'd like to say that I am here to represent my mother, Beulah Lamb, who is at 509 Boar's Head Road. And my presentation this evening will factor on the 3 key elements, which I would like to draw to Council's attention. And just for a little bit of history, my mother and father built the house in 1962 when the Boar's Head Road was a dirt road and we had Bullock's Farm where Milledgeville North School is today. So it is a very difficult terrain. I remember when my parents built the house, the blasting that was ongoing. And I think at the time, the only people that were had issues with it were the cows. So blasting in NB is regulated through the Blasting Code Approval Regulation under the Municipality Act. And I was under the belief that the jurisdiction for blasting was the provincial government. So I decided to do a little investigation, and I contacted the Department of Environmental for the approval for blasting at 573 Woodward Avenue. And I received correspondence on October 28th from a Mr. Mark Glenn, who was the Manager Permitting South Authorization Branch of the NB Department of Environment and Local Government. And in the email, he stated, in response to your inquiry, if the blasting is related to a construction project, i.e. residential commercial development, then an approval to operate is not required from the Department of Environment and Local Government. There is an operational policy on our department website related to this. See link below, which I did look, I investigated. And he said, if there are any issues or concerns related to blasting for this construction project, it would be for the City of St. John to address. Regards, Mark. So I was in a quandary to ask the question, who is responsible for the oversight with regards to if blasting is to occur? Is it the provincial government or is it the City of St. John? In the meantime, I decided to do a little further investigation, and I looked and I found urban construction blasting in Canada, complaints and associated municipal bylaws. And this came out of the University of British Columbia. And the beginning of the abstract states, blasting in urban environments frequently result in both legitimate and frivolous complaints, even though effective blasting practices and associated protective measures exist. Analysis of blasting-related complaints in the existing state of blasting regulations applicable to Canadian municipalities was conducted. Provincial blasting regulations technically do not prescribe the need for notification of planned blast, pre-blast surveys, and blasting monitoring. In the presence of these requirements, some municipalities have developed their own blasting bylaws. Anecdotal results suggest that when a well-designed municipal blasting bylaw is present and is enforced, then complaints from the public are greatly reduced. To aid municipalities, this paper presents a generic blasting bylaw along with recommendations for a blast notification protocol that were developed with input from blasting contractors and consultants. Key features in the bylaw required the blaster to 1. Obtain a municipal blasting permit, 2. Notify residents within a specific distance from the blast site of impending blast, 3. Carry out pre-blast surveys, and 4. Use a third-party vibration monitoring consultant. Now, reading the report that came to council, if it is approved this evening, the developer would like to start in December. And my issue is Who will do the oversight? Full disclosure, I am not an engineer, but I have looked into the fact that we do have acoustic environment standards. I've also noted that potential changes in sound quality could be an increase in traffic noise, increased noise from blasting and pile driving, increased noise from mobile construction equipment, such as the removal of rock, increased noise from other site activities, and perceivable ground vibration and ground vibration causing structural damage. Now, these are residents that have been here for a number of years, and I'm certain that council does not want to apply any further damage to their foundations. And so I would prefer that we have some type of a plan that would be able to advise the residents of what they will be able to find from the council. So who will be doing the monitoring? Who will be doing the pre-existing? And how will this affect? And if there is damage, what will the process be? And my mother is 94 years of age, and I know other residents would probably like the same process, but I believe at her age, it should be a seamless process if any damage should occur during this construction of the development. Last but not least, I believe that it is important for council to recognize that you continue that, and rightly so, increase the population density in this particular area. And for years now, I have been strongly advocating for a completion of the Boar's Head Road. There is no sidewalk from the Wesleyan Church to the end of the Boar's Head Road. And I am very concerned, as if it's my mother, that there is going to be an accident. That we have numerous school children now walking to either Milledgeville North or Samuel de Champlain. We have young families going with their, and of course, if it's not, there's no plow because there's no sidewalk. And in fact, we know that if we have the mailbox, community mailbox right in the center of where it's not paved. We have one of the bus stops right in front of my mother's house where it's not paved. And I hate to say this, but there's going to be a tragedy along there. And today, I'll give you a prime example. I stopped to get my mother's mail. So my back was facing the road and I heard this noise and I turned around and I thought, gee, what is that? Well, it was one of the large construction vehicles. And right in front there is a little sign that says 50 kilometers an hour. And I will tell you that they were not going 50 kilometers an hour. So I really believe that we need to look at the process. We need to look at due diligence. Have we crossed all our T's and dotted all our I's to make sure that it's less intrusive to the residents of the area? And that I guess at the end of the day, the question is, it's ambiguous for sure, but when I got the email from Fredericton, it certainly put it on the site of the council to be looking at all of these questions and having them answered before we move forward with this development. And with that, I thank you for your time and your patience.
Oh, Mayor, you're on.
You're on mute, Your Worship.
Councillor Redwan, did you have a question?
I
just see your
do.
hand up. Yeah, go ahead.
I do. Thank you, Mayor Reed, and to you too, Mrs. McCormick. Thank you for your presentation. And that, was, you've given a lot of thought to this, obviously, and a lot of research. Just wondering if there is there anything that that would happen with this project that would make you comfortable with it going forward?
Well, thank you for the question, Councillor Redden. I believe more work has to be done. I don't think we've done our fiduciary duty in getting the questions answered. I believe that there has to be parameters put in place to be able to alleviate some of the hazards that can cause from blasting, but it's not just blasting, it's all of the other elements too. And I find it interesting that some of the reading that I have done, and full disclosure, I'm not an engineer, that it's not necessarily the blast, it's actually the changing in the geographical area, the plate, that may move the structure of buildings. And there are standards, and it has to be monitored. And we have to stay within that range, or there will be subsequent damage to people's property. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay, I think that's it. Oh, Councillor Deputy Mackenzie, do you have a question for David McCormick?
Just a follow-up. I got a note here from Mark Glenn. Maybe I think it was the same person that sent you the email.
Yeah.
And just for clarification, he says that the blasting is regulated by Section 147 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, administered by WorkSafe NB. His comments to you were to indicate that NB Environment and local government do not regulate blasting associated with housing development. So it's, I think we're getting there, Debbie. It's the wording of things. I just wanted to clarify that comment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. All right. Thank you again. City Clerk, did you have another person registered to speak against the application? Oh.
Yes, I do, Mayor.
Okay.
The next registered speaker is Charles Smith.
Charles.
We could have Mr. Smith unmute, please.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Smith. I can hear you.
Thank you. I kind of got on this late. I got my days mixed up, so I don't have a great presentation like Debbie had. My concern, I guess, I'm right at 569 Woodward, which is going to have the road come right through me. So my concerns are more basically, I'm not opposed to it by any means. I think it's a good idea. It's just, you know, what are the mitigating factors that we're going to take to make sure, like Debbie said, you know, no construction, no collateral damage. I'm concerned about the amount of traffic that will now be going through my front yard. Because according to the engineering report, I think it's like at peak, it'll be like 80 cars. And I'd like to know more about that, just like where that number came from. I'm worried about ambient light because I've got a big bay window that faces uphill. And if there is apartment buildings, several, then there will be some issues with the lighting. I'm worried about with water, like drainage from like storms. We had a big storm this summer that washed that road out, and I couldn't get one of my vehicles out of my driveway because it was washed out that bad. The city did come along and fix it, which I appreciate, but it was a couple of weeks. So like I said, I've got nothing to present, but I just wanted to make sure my voice was heard. It was recorded, and just to bring it up, make sure it was a point was made, that's all. I talked to Peter earlier today, actually. He was by. I had a good conversation with him. Like I said, I'm in favor of doing it. I think it's a good thing. It's just, what are we going to do to mitigate some of these concerns?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Councillor Harris, did you have a question for Mr. Smith?
No question, Your Worship, just a comment. Should I not? Yeah, just a quick comment. Charles, it's absolutely a legitimate concern. You know, we've seen examples in the past of the city passing, you know, either variances or whatever that have led to problems, but we do have some really good people at the city with Director Poffenroth as our chief inspector, if I'm getting her title right, but she has a designated role from the province of New Brunswick to ensure that these type of developments, and her office, which would be all of our city inspectors, would be looking at these and making sure they meet the required minimums of the 2015 code. So it's certainly, you know, your concern is right, and we're happy to hear you tonight, and I'm glad you came to tell us that. But as a councillor, I would have certainly I would have confidence in our department to fulfill the roles and obligations of that updated code, which was only passed even just a year ago, to accept that 2015 code requirement, which would include drainage issues, which would include code requirements and things like that. So I know that staff will have a chance to answer questions later, but yeah, just to recognize your comments. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, can I just respond to that?
Sure.
I understand exactly what you're saying, Brent. I agree. Being an engineer myself, though, I also know things occasionally go out of what we plan or hope to happen. And it's just, what is our plan to deal with that? You know what I mean? It's, that's why I'm saying mitigating. It's, if everything goes as planned, it's probably great. But what happens if, I know there's like 1 in 100-year plan per storm for most, that's one of the things people plan for. But how are we going, how are we dealing, do we propose to deal with it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's something we can certainly ask staff later. Yeah.
Sure. Terrific.
Councillor Radwan, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question, Mr. Smith. I just heard that you said that you're an engineer. Just wondering what area of specialization you're in.
Oh, I'm a mechanical engineer, so I like my things to move, which isn't what civil engineering is about, but.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. I was just curious.
Exactly.
No problem.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Okay, City Clerk, did you have anyone else registered to speak against the application?
Your Worship, I did not, and so I guess at this stage it would be appropriate if you called out within the audience if there are any other members wishing to speak in opposition.
So is there anyone else that would like to speak against the application? Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak against the application? And I'll ask once more for 3 times. Is there anyone who would like to speak against this application for 573 Woodward Avenue? Okay, let's move to those that want to speak in favor of the application. Who do you have registered, City Clerk?
Mayor, the first person we have registered is Dawn Starrett.
Excellent.
Madam Mayor, councillors.
Mr. Starrett, there you are. We see you and can hear you.
Oh, wonderful.
You've got the floor.
Maybe not so much for you. Anyway, we'll, the staff have given a good presentation of the scope of work that is there. And the staff report, we have a couple of items on the staff report. Well, it's very thorough and we don't have any major issues with it. There were 2 issues that came up earlier that we would like to discuss related with the Section 59 requirements. One was the 45-meter separation buffer from the adjoining property line. The plans that we've submitted are conceptual in nature, and while the 45-meter setback quite probably isn't going to be a problem, we had asked for something less in the event that we quite literally get caught between a rock and a hard place on this site. It's a difficult site, a lot of exposed rock on the site, and if coming back from the property lines that are along Boar's Head Road, we want to have as gentle a slope down to those property lines as possible from the road that we'll be going in. And in order to achieve that, once we do our final grades for the road, we may need a few meters one way or the other. And we were just wondering if there's some way that we can find some way of modifying the 45-meter setback to something a bit less if we do run into a situation that a localized area where we have a difficulty, perhaps something like 40 meters, just to have, again, a little bit of elbow room in the event that there's an issue there. The other item was the 14-meter building height. Probably no problem with that, quite frankly. But the site does have some fairly difficult topography, and we just don't want to get locked into a situation where we may have, again, a very localized area where we can't achieve the 14 meters. And it's, again, the 14 meters probably is fine. We're just, in the event that we do have a situation, once we get down to the final design, we wondered if there was some mechanism that staff could have, that they could have some flexibility if we needed to go to 15 meters or 15 and a half meters in one location. The issue with the Section 59 is, of course, we have to go through a fair process if we do run into an issue at a later date. So those are two items that, the only two items that we had to address that we would like to put forward.
Okay, yeah, I read those in the kit there, Mr. Sterrett, and I guess we'll have an opportunity maybe to talk to staff or to ask staff to deal with that, or some questions for staff. But does anyone have any questions for Mr. Sterrett? All right, no questions for Mr. Sterrett? All right. Oh, Councillor Redwan has a question for you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Reardon. I have a few actually. So thank you, Mr. Sterrett. I was just wondering, so there was discussion at one point that there would be actually two entryways constructed, so that there would be two streets going into the unit. And of course, with there being 225 units going in there, it's a lot of people. Is that something that you're going to be doing?
Unfortunately, we don't, access to the site is limited off of Woodward Avenue because of, that's the only property access that we have to the property. There was some discussion at an earlier time about undeveloped property to the south, the possibility of having some sort of a secondary access out through there. That is a possibility, but without knowing what kind of development's going to take place there and when, it would be premature for us to say anything at this point.
Okay, and Mr. Sterrett, I was wondering too, of course, there's been some concerns about blasting, and I saw in the council packet that you're also considering maybe putting underground parking, and I'm very familiar with the area, so I know it is very rocky there. I'm just wondering if you have had any reports that you've presented that I just haven't seen, where a structural engineer would discuss that there would be no damage to surrounding properties. And I'm also wondering about a noise buffer as well. I mean, that could be extremely loud for residents that would be living very close by.
We're at early stages in the process. Of course, before rezoning, the client is not interested in engaging a lot of consulting work until we know whether, in fact, we can proceed. That being said, the concept that you see before took into consideration the existing grades, and the reason for the road location the way it is we're trying to avoid as much rock removal as possible, both from a disruption perspective and also from a cost perspective. Removing rock is not an inexpensive process, so the intent would be to keep that at a minimum. In terms of noise, mitigation, trying to avoid that, it's blasting is blasting, and it would be nice if there was some process that could be done. I mean, they will be putting mats down. There will be legislative processes that they have to go through, but in terms of erecting noise buffers or anything like that, I wouldn't be aware of anything that would really be of a lot of benefit.
So I'm just wondering, where you haven't had a report from a structural engineer, what is, what can make council feel assured that there would be no damage to residents' properties?
Again, the legislative process that you go through. I mean, the standards that that the contractors have to work to are designed to keep the public safe, both in terms of property and the public, as best as possible. Because of the nature of construction, and you can reduce risks, to a very low level. To promise that it will never happen, that nothing would happen, well, the only way we could do that would be to do nothing. It's very difficult.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starrett. Deputy, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Starrett, I've seen a lot of projects over the last 10 years. This strikes me as being very tight. Would that be a correct assumption in your opinion? Like, do you find that this is, like, we're looking now at going from 45 down to 40 or 35 is this a tight project for you in a hard to work area?
In terms of the lot occupancy, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, the parcel of land with what you want to do with it, do you find that the size of the land is making it very tight for you to do this?
No, it's doable. What we've proposed here was, we did in terms of developing the concept. I don't want you to think that it was just thrown down on the paper. We did spend a fair amount of time looking at the existing contours, and there was a lot of work that was done. You saw the submission, the last rezoning application. There was a lot of work done at that time by the civil engineer and surveying engineers, looking at the site and looking at access of the site that we benefited from in this process. I can understand your comment, though. When you're looking at the drawings, unfortunately, the drawings don't give you the benefit of the third dimension as well as we'd like them to, because of the slope of the site. It'll be much more generous than I think it might be indicated on the plans. You're looking at 2 dimensions when you're looking down at the plan, where the slopes, you have more dimension on that. So you have more topography for some vegetation and that sort of thing. So it's doable. And we love to have nice green fields with, with lots of area. But I had an old professor who once said the most difficult sites make the most interesting projects. And I have to say, I think this is going to be one of them.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. It looks like that's it for questions for you, Mr. Stair. Oh, yes, for you. And then we'll call up our next speaker. City Clerk, you have Mr. Pappas registered?
I do, Your Worship. Mr. Peter Pappas is registered to speak in support of this project.
Okay. Mr. Pappas? Oh, there you are. Okay, Mr. Pappas, are you there? You're muted. You're not muted now. We don't hear you or see you, but we see that you are registered.
Your Worship, perhaps we could come back to Mr. Pappas and go to the next registered speaker and just try to resolve any audio issues Mr. Pappas is having. So the next speaker we had registered is Aaron Toole.
Okay. Aaron Toole, are you on the line?
Well, I'm not showing Aaron Toole in our list, although they did register.
We have the icon for Mr. Pappas, but we don't have anything else.
So, Your Worship, if you'd like to take a brief recess, we could attempt to contact Mr. Pappas to arrange for the audio.
All right, let's do that. We'll take we'll just take whatever, however long it takes for you to, oh, here we go.
Oh, I see. Yeah, let's see if this works, Your Worship.
See if that works.
Mr. Pappas, is your audio working?
All right, will we take a bio break for 4 minutes or 3 minutes or something? Maybe, and see if we can get the last two.
Yeah, Your Worship, if you just took a motion to recess, we could come back in
I'll have a
about
motion to
4 or
recess.
5 minutes.
Councillor Hickey and Councillor Ogden on the question, all in favor? Contrary minded, motion carried. All right, 5 minutes. Thank you.
It's Peter Pappas. Yeah, sorry about that. I'm having some difficulty here. Yes, it is. Okay, thanks.
Okay, city clerk, did we have any luck?
Mayor, yes, we did.
Okay.
So as long as all the members are back, we could call the meeting back to order.
All right, well, let's see who's back here. I can't see if everyone's back. Oh, there we go. All right, can you see if everyone's back? Is everyone back?
I'm just counting the members, Your Worship. There's quite a few people in this meeting, so just making sure we have everyone.
Okay. I don't see Councillor Hickey, but he may be there.
Councillor Hickey, are you present?
Your Worship, it's the city manager. I'm in theater mode and I can count all 11 necessary councillors are present and accounted for.
Thank you. All right. So, city clerk, do I need a motion to resume the meeting?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'll take
You can call the meeting back to order yourself. You've had a
I'll call
motion to take
back
a
to order.
recess.
That's nice and simple. Call the meeting back to order. Okay, so we
And
have
Your Worship,
another.
we had our guest that is now available on the phone, And this is Peter Pappas, who has registered to speak in support of the project.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. My apologies. This has worked every time for me in the past. I have no idea what happened. I just wanted to speak to the blasting question. When you hire a blaster to come in to do a job like this, they have, first of all, have to have all the insurance in place. They do have to hire independent monitor to monitor all the blasting. There is a pre-blast survey within a certain radius. They go out and inspect all the homes. And of course, it's kind of under very strict guidelines. You can just imagine what the insurance company makes them do for due diligence. And also too, for the blasting, of course, everything's matted. So it's very rare for anything to go wrong. And the only other thing too, in reference to the blasting, it may be painful for a short term, but it's a lot less painful than the mechanical hammers going for a year as well, would be my point. That's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Pappas? All right, looks like we're good there. Thank you. Oh, sorry, the deputy has a question, I think, or a comment. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one quick, when you say it's painful, but it's a shorter period of time, for a project like this, what would you estimate the blasting time to be?
Good question, but we don't know yet. As soon as we get the engineering report from our civil engineer, we'll know the rock quantities, and then we'd be able to answer that question.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, it looks like that's it for questions. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, even though it was arduous to get here. City Clerk, do you have the last, did you have any luck reaching Aaron Toole?
Your Worship, we did not. So other than if you call out one more time, whether there's a speaker available, that would be my suggestion.
All right, so I will ask if there is anyone who would like to speak in favor of the application. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this application? Anyone who would like to speak in favor of 573 Woodward Avenue application? Okay, I will close the public hearing. And so now, councilors, if you have any questions for staff, you have, where are my notes here? You have Mark Ahern, you have Tim O'Reilly on the line, and I think you have another staff person as well. Councillor Sullivan, did you have a question for staff? So before we get started, I just want to say one thing, that this is a land use planning, so try to keep your questions in the scope of land use planning. Councillor Sullivan, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, my question has to do with pedestrian traffic. This is a proposed very large density increase. And Ms. McCormick talked about the sidewalk at the end of Boar's Head Road, which, you know, we kind of talked about for many years. But with this large number of potential new homes just around the corner, I guess I'd like to hear from city staff with regards to pedestrian traffic, pedestrian flow, pedestrian safety, with regards to walkability at full build out of this project. Thanks.
Thank you. Over to Mr. O'Hearn. Are you going to take that? City Manager, I see your light on.
Your Worship, I think we'll have Director O'Reilly start from our traffic engineer point of view, and then I might add on a comment or two.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Over to you, Director O'Reilly.
Certainly. Thanks, Your Worship, and thanks for the question, Councillor Sullivan. So certainly when we're looking at this development, you know, we had pedestrian safety and connectivity in mind. For example, the connection onto Woodward Avenue, we checked to find out if there was a crosswalk needed to get to the other side of the street. So that was important. Certainly going over to the missing section of sidewalk on Boar's Head Road. We do have an sidewalk infill strategy as part of Move SJ. And so as we go forward, we'll be looking at prioritizing different sections of missing sidewalk around the city and factors such as demand, including future demand from developments such as this, proximities to schools, which there are two obviously in the area, transit hubs, etc., will go as part of putting a sidewalk higher priority than others. Another factor that Ms. McCormick talked about is the pedestrian safety factor. So she was concerned about the speeds of traffic on Boar's Head Road. So again, issues of the operating speeds of vehicles, as well as if there are any evidence of pedestrian injuries or deaths on a particular street, that would again add on to that priority of a street. So to answer your question in a nutshell, yes, in terms of the sidewalk on Boar's Head and its incorporation of that sidewalk infill strategy, we're going to look at that, as well as the connection of this development specifically onto Woodward Avenue.
Thank you, Director.
Thanks, Director O'Reilly. I guess the other, what I would,
all right,
just as a bit of a follow-up to suggest for staff, you know, we've certainly have had some significant projects recently where our staff has spoken with the proponents, whether it be the project by Tin Can Beach or actually the traffic calming we've just done out by the former zoo, where some of those projects, because of the effect of the newer developments, the developers have contributed to those projects. So I guess I would suggest to staff that if in the study that Mr. O'Reilly was just talking about with regards to our infill strategy with sidewalks, along with the potential necessity for this particular sidewalk because of the increased density in the area, perhaps we should be speaking with the developer with regards to sharing in some of those infrastructure costs. And I'll just leave that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sullivan. City Manager, are you good with that? Or did you want to chime in with anything?
I have no additional comment, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Councillor Harris, you're up.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is basically just a poll from the two callers that called in. Not, you know, and admittedly, they said they weren't opposed to the project, even though they were speaking in opposition in some ways. But I see Commissioner Hamilton. I don't know if I see Director Poffenroth on there. Tim is certainly on here. We have one exit coming out of this. So the first question would be to Director Tim O'Reilly regarding that single road out for 250 new additional units. I know that when we build in the code books, the code assumes 2 people per bedroom for our minimum occupancy stuff. So I've, you know, worked on buildings and, you know, there's only 4 buildings in there, but the code assumes there's 8 and or four bedrooms, and the code assumes 8, and there's a certain threshold of code requirements that comes with that. So maybe you can speak to that a little bit. And then the other question maybe can be taken by Ms. Topkins from a legal perspective. Are there any recourse options that we have with these current agreements should certain things like rain mitigation or traffic violations or things to that nature that were raised by, I think it was Mr. Kane, but I'm getting the people mixed up after the fact. It was the engineer that spoke. You know, what mitigating things do we have in place to, or I guess recourse options is the better word. So those are my 2, Your Worship. Thank you.
And Your Worship, I can start in the first one. So I guess your direct question, Councillor Harris, was around, I guess, assuming or we're estimating the number of people that are going to come out of a particular new development. We have knowledge books in place that identify, I guess, on average with different types of developments, how many trips are expected in and out of whether it's residential, commercial, etc., based on, again, the number of units, the type of units, etc., number of bedrooms. So that's developed by a group called the Institute of Transportation Engineers. So whether it's myself or a consultant working on a different project, we use those estimates from that knowledge book to create relatively accurate estimates as to how many people are going to be coming in and out by way of vehicle and other modes of transportation. So that includes, in this particular case, how many vehicle trips will be coming in and out of that single access onto Woodward Avenue.
Okay. Mr. O'Hearn, I see your hand up there. Are you, are you going to chime into Councillor Harris's questions?
I just wanted to take a moment, Your Worship, and remind Council that the subdivision bylaw will regulate the street and the lot configuration, and that Council and the committee will have an opportunity later to look at a tentative subdivision application. And so we'll look at those matters a little more closely with the applicant and with city staff.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Radwan.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few questions. First of all, I am wondering if Director O'Reilly, I'm just wondering a couple of things about traffic. So I saw in our council packet that an evaluation was done over a 12-hour period of time for a traffic study. That doesn't sound like a lot of time. So what's the standard?
Well, typically with traffic counts, you want to pick the 3 typical peak hour times, which are about 6 hours a day. So your morning peak, your lunchtime peak, especially in business areas, but this is not, as well as your evening peak. So typically, if you can complete those counts over those 6 peak hours during the day, that will identify kind of your worst case scenario in terms of background traffic. And obviously, in this case, with it being residential development, it'll be similar type of flow. People will be coming out in the morning in the peak, as well as coming home in the afternoon peak. So those 6 peak hours are the important time to collect the data, as well as do your analysis in terms of your worst case scenario.
Okay, and I'm just wondering, it says in section 59 that the applicant would be responsible for any work needed to address quote unquote traffic issues. Please define what is it meant by traffic issues. It sounds very broad.
Yeah, so again, that will be identified as part of this development process. So as an example, not saying this happens or not, but as an example, let's just say there was a crosswalk that was needed from the development across Woodward Avenue. That would be, as an example, be something that the developer would be required to install. So that's just by way of an example. So if any type of traffic issues are generated specifically to a development, then that will be on the developer. Certainly the question Councillor Sullivan had earlier about contributions to a broader transportation issue, that's certainly a different question. But if there's any traffic issues directly caused by a development, that would become the responsibility of the developer. And again, as example, a crosswalk.
Okay. And my big question is about blasting. So I was forwarded the email from Mrs. McCormick that came from the province stating that it was the city's responsibility. So I'm wondering if it is the province's responsibility, can you tell me where that would be legislated? And how would that be overseen? The other thing that I'm wondering, I think that I need general counsel for, is I want to make sure that the residents of the city is not going to be held liable if there's any damage done to any other property. How can we ensure that?
So is Director O'Reilly, who's going to answer this?
I'd be happy to provide an answer, Your Worship.
Go ahead.
We did contact the individual from Environment and Local Government that did provide those original comments today. He did clarify his comments in that, as it was mentioned earlier, there's a regulation by the Occupational Health and Safety Act, Section 147, that will regulate this. Work NB will oversee it. The regulations are followed by the applicant or the applicant's licensed blaster. As far as the city, the only thing I would comment, and it came up at the committee meeting, the previous development also for the site will require presumably blasting as well. And so all the regulation that this development will go under will be the same legislative requirements that the province has. And the thing I would comment on, Your Worship, is the semi-detaches that were proposed back in 2018 were very close to the properties along Woodward and Boar's Head Road. And presumably they would have required individual blasting for each foundation. So the nice feature about the revised proposal is that while the buildings are larger, they're much further away from the properties, and the corresponding need for preparing the sites are much further away than what was originally approved in 2018, and which could have proceeded and blasting under the provincial requirements.
I'm just wondering, Mr. O'Haron, one thing that I know that would help me feel kind of a bit of relief with these sort of proposals is if there was something from a structural engineer stating that there wouldn't be any issue with causing damage to other people's properties. But I mean, obviously they're not able to go forth if there would end up being any damage caused, right?
Yeah, I believe, sorry, Councillor. I believe the applicant, Mr. Pappas, had indicated that there need to be a pre-blast survey within certain distances. So I would tend to think that that's a very important mitigating factor. As Mr. Sterrett mentioned, there's no absolute guarantees. I couldn't provide counsel tonight or anyone that there couldn't be a problem, but there's a lot of risk mitigation that the legislation provides for.
So who's actually going to be liable for if there was damage to somebody's property? Maybe Ms. Tompkins can chime in. I just want to make sure that by doing this zoning, the city is not going to end up being liable for this sort of thing. Like, if we're not overseeing it, then I wouldn't think that we would be held liable.
We're not overseeing it, and I'll ask Ms. Tompkins if she would like to respond to that. At the end of the day, it's like Mr. O'Hearn has said, and also Don Sterrett, that there's a process there are codes there. To have any of this work done, you have to be licensed and you have to operate properly. So I guess at the end of the day, you can't take all of the risk out of any project that you do, but you can mitigate it to the best of your ability. So I will ask Ms. Tompkins if she can respond to that.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess what I will say is that the efforts undergone by the contractor are regulated by the Occupational Health and Safety Act and the regulations enacted thereunder. They are held to those requirements, and the city has no role to play in that. I just want to make sure that I understand the councillor's question. Obviously, who's responsible for what? Us lawyers cannot tell you. An answer now will say it'll depend on the facts, but if your question is by exercising your authority on a land use application, does that pull you into liability if a contractor does not comply with their blasting requirements under the Occupational Health and Safety Act? I would be inclined to say that's highly unlikely that the city would be pulled in that.
Perfect. Thank you. Deputy, you are up next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, a couple of my concerns have already been addressed. I do have a concern with one entrance, one exit for a complex that size with all of Cedar Point, the trailer park, and all the houses along there. I also would like to see, as Councillor Sullivan pointed out, some discussions around, improving that neighborhood a little bit, proper sidewalk and curbing, crosswalks and that sort of stuff, just as we do with other developments that we undertake. So the blasting issue is, it's a concern for me more about how long it goes on than I know that there's been a number of projects in St. John where they've blasted. I've watched them. They've got the process down and all that. And I know that they take before and after pictures. But for me, it's about how long it takes to get the job done, because I don't want it to go on and on and on like others have, for months and months. So those would be the things that I'd like staff to talk about and work out and as we move forward. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Radwan, did you have something else?
Yeah, I just had one other question. I noticed in this application that there is no mention of land for public purpose contributions. Is that something that's automatic for the developer to pay?
Mr. O'Hearn, over to you.
Your worship, so in the subdivision application that the applicant has yet to make, that will be one of those items that we'll deal with.
Perfect. Thank you. That looks like that's it. I do have a quick question for you, Mr. O'Hearn. Oh, right now, Councillor Ogden, you have a question or a comment? You're muted.
Yes, Mayor Reardon, thank you. I would like to see the sidewalks too. There are schools in the area, the growing population, and I would like to see, you know, again, look at the speed limit on in these areas, and also I'd like to see sidewalks in these areas for the increased population. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Hearn, I do have two quick questions for you. Mr. Stair talked about the 14-meter height and the topography and how that could be, the differential could be there based on the topography. Is that going to be a problem for them, do you think? I read through the kit. It sounds like it isn't going to be a problem, but I don't know if you can speak to that.
The 14-meter height limitation is the maximum for this zone. The supplemental report indicates that the way the bylaw defines height, there is flexibility in that definition, average grade, and it removes localized depressions such as garage entrances and pedestrian entrances. So we're of the opinion that there is the flexibility built in already. The only other option is either for council to increase that absolute number, height number, or to take it out completely, and then it would become a variance, which is subject to the consideration of either the development officer or the planning advisory committee. So if council wants the ability to impose that maximum height, it's got to be through a section 59 and it has to spell out an exact number.
Okay, so that sounds like that probably is not going to be a problem based on that supplementary report that I read through for them.
That's our opinion, yeah.
Yeah, opinion. And what about the 45-meter setback versus 30? Just for the public.
Yeah, so that if the council is happy with the rendering, that will ensure that the buildings are approximately low. Numerically isn't that substantial. The applicant proposed 30 meters, which was quite substantial and not something staff could recommend to the committee a couple of weeks ago. But the closest building, the 75 unit, is about 47 meters away from those properties along Boar's Head, and you had two speakers tonight concerned about that proximity. So the 45 meters seems to make sense, at least from those two viewpoints of those residents.
Right, perfect. Sounds good. All right, so that's it. There's no more questions. So I will look for a motion. Councillor Harris, I'm looking for a motion for first reading by title, and I'm looking for a second motion reading by title. So on the first motion, reading by title, you have a motion? Okay, Councillor Harris and Councillor Killen. On the question? All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Contrary minded, Paula. Councillor Radwan, are you contrary? Okay. So okay. City Clerk, over to you.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Thank you. Okay, so now I need a second reading by title. I need a motion for a second reading by title. The deputy and Councillor Harris on the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Councillor Radwan, contrary. Motion carried. Over to, okay, City Clerk, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So that concludes the public hearing. Next on the agenda is a submission by a council member, and that's item 11.1, A submission from Councillor Hickey entitled Parker's Corner.
Okay, Councillor Hickey, over to you, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Fairly straightforward motion that I'm bringing forward to council today, but certainly one that offers a lot of impact on a pretty tight-knit community. I'll offer a quick background, and then with a seconder would be able to offer a bit more insight should anyone have any questions. On October 10th, 2020, St. John lost Parker Cogswell to his battle with cancer. Parker was a long-standing member of the South End community, known for his sociability and friendship. Since his passing, Parker's neighbors around his Mecklenburg Street home have dubbed the corner where his garden reaches Carmarthen Street, Parker's Corner. Neighbors, friends, and family have come to use this space as a gathering point to celebrate Parker's life and their tight community. The motion would read that the City of St. John move towards recognizing the southwestern corner of Carmarthen Street and Mecklenburg Street as Parker's Corner by referring this suggestion to the Civic Commemoration Committee for consideration and final recommendation. And with a seconder, I can answer any questions.
Seconded by Councillor Sullivan. So this is a referral motion going over to the Civic Commemorative Committee, which in Q1 will be established, and then we'll begin to recognize some of our citizens, our outstanding citizens. So there's no discussion on it because it's a referral motion unless there's a discussion on should we or shouldn't we. So if there's no discussion on should we or shouldn't we, then I'll call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, thank you, Councillor Hickey, for that. City Clerk, back to you.
Yes, Your Worship. So next, under business matters, we have item 12.1, and this is the work plan for 2022 and 2023. And the city manager will be taking council through this.
All right, City Manager, over to you. Get comfortable, staff. This is going to take a little more than 10 minutes, or I should say team, get comfortable. There's a lot of work in this plan. Over to you, City Manager. Thank you.
Your Worship, members of council, thank you, Your Worship. You stole my thunder. This will not be a standard 5 to 10 minute presentation from staff because there is a little bit more detail and amplification that's required for this particular presentation. But I will nonetheless try to go through it as quickly as possible. By way of introduction, this slide simply reminds all of us as to what the role of staff is. It is much more than simply providing advice to council and executing the will of council. That's the commonly recognized purpose of staff, but also we play a pivotal role in delivering the services to the community, getting best value for our money, and always working on continuous improvement. This very simplistic diagram talks about what consumes the time of the staff. It is fair to characterize that the vast majority of our time is spent on the execution of daily operations and functions, making sure that solid waste management is working well, making sure we do pothole repairs, making sure we deliver on safe, clean drinking water, making sure our protective services are available, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It is the daily operations and the management of the workforce that executes those daily operations. In addition to those daily operations, there is a tranche or a portion of our time that is dedicated to emergency operations, the unknown, the things that pop up that are truly, if not a crisis, of an urgent nature and need to be dealt with. So the little block of time left on the right-hand side of this slide is the surplus capacity that we have to deal with new stuff. And I used to call it new stuff on this slide, but I got a little bit more sophisticated in my terminology and now call it emerging initiatives. But it is the new stuff, the out of the ordinary. In recent years, we have been further challenged by the reality that emergency operations has not been a small little sliver at the bottom of the slide. Whether you talk about the 2 back-to-back floods of the century, the butane explosion, the pandemic, or the cyber attack, emergency operations have consumed more time than usual. And I think that needs to be recognized and its effect on emerging initiatives and, quite frankly, also on daily operations. So when we talk about a work plan for the staff, it actually is not just about initiatives. It's about all of that other stuff as well. I am not going to spend a lot of time this evening talking about the other stuff, talking about daily operations, or talking about emergency operations. Therefore, it's fair to characterize this particular presentation as not a presentation on the entirety of the work plan, but rather a presentation on the initiatives within that plan. I show this slide not to go through the structure of the entire organization. That's not the purpose here this evening. I show it to give you a visual of the entirety of the management and professional staff, and it's structured as you see here. The point I'd like to make is that in gray, you see all the functions, all the major functions that we need to deliver as a staff. And then in red are the overwatch main leadership functions that need to occur. The point is, if you were to add all this up, there are 63 functional areas that need to be addressed. There's 11 leadership roles in addition to the ones in the gray that need to be exercised, for a total of 74 managerial responsibilities. We have a total of 88 management and professional staff to deliver on those 74 responsibilities. The saying of being one deep certainly applies. I would also like to make a point at this time that in large cities that do large initiatives, they actually have a staff responsible for the conduct of daily operations, and they have a separate staff that does their long-term planning. We are a small city. We cannot afford the luxury of having two staffs, one for daily operations and one for long-term planning. Yet we try to do a lot of what big cities does. Everything from all of our suite of financial policies, to our fundamental redesign of a transit system, to the reinvention of a solid waste management system. In a large city, those would be executed by a long range or planning staff. In the city of St. John, that planning staff and the daily operations staff is one and the same. I mention that simply to drive home the point that there is a limited capacity, not capability, but capacity as to what we can achieve. So before I talk about 2022 and onwards, I'd like to take a quick review of 2021. In the work plan of 2021, and this is an update because we are not yet complete 2021, there were a number of key considerations. First of all, we had just gone through a major forced restructure, a major reduction in our budgets, and a fundamental change in some of our customer service delivery. And after you do that in a year such as 2020, there has to be a consolidation period. Did we get it right? What additional adjustments are required, etc. Then, of course, we got hit by the cyber attack, and that significantly has impacted our ability to deliver on some of these longer term initiatives. Our routine operations, as I've already flogged, remain our largest consumer of time, people, and money in 2021. And then, of course, there's been the added challenges of working through all of this in a pandemic. And then finally, there was a municipal election, which of course does have an impact on our ability to deliver on the work plan. I'm going to go through an assessment of where we sit on the 2021 work plan, and I'm going to use this color coding to describe the various functions. A green check mark is obviously complete. A green circle shows that we are on track. A yellow circle indicates that there's been some slippage. An orange indicates that we have not made any significant progress on this time. And a gray one means it's ongoing and probably will be for a very long time. Those color codings will be at the top of the various slides as we go through this. In 2021, we had divided our work plan into 3 tiers. Tier 1 were those things that we wanted to complete by the end of the calendar year, which is all of 2 months from today. I think it's fair to say that because of the pandemic and because of the cyber attack, we have seen some slippage in a number of different areas. The slippage is not dramatic. We're talking months, not years. But the reality is a lot of our projects, as you can see on this slide, will be completed not by the end of the year, but by sometime in 2022. I highlight the importance of this because these items need to be carried forward into our next work plan because there's still work to be done in 2022 on these various items. I will not speak to any of these in detail because all the ones that are being carried forward will be discussed when I review the work plan for next year. Similarly, Tier 2 were items that we defined that we would start in 2021 and we would complete over a 2-year period, so by the end of 2022. Because we have a longer runway, we believe that all of these remain on track. Yes, we fell behind in 2021 because of the cyber attack and the pandemic, but we will be able to make up that time, and therefore I see no difficulty maintaining the timeline on these. But again, the ones that are not complete need to be carried forward into next year's work plan. And again, I will speak about that when we get there. This is page 2 of the same tier, a 2-year window to complete by the end of 2022. And you see here that we again remain on track for the most part. I have put a question mark beside the Ashburn interchange as one of our catalytic infrastructure projects because there is some doubt as to the approach to be taken moving forward on that particular project, and council is aware. And finally, there is a yellow dot at the end. I had committed to this council that the rideshare bylaw, although it was supposed to be a Tier 2 project and completed over 2 years, I had committed that I would get it done by the end of 2021, after 1 year. I will not be able to accomplish that, and it will slide modestly into the second year. This is the third slide on the Tier 2 projects, and again, they remain on track, and those without check marks need to be carried forward. And then finally, there were the Tier 3 projects. These were the ones that we would get to if time allowed. And you can see that time allowed us to get to approximately 50% of these. And the remainder of them, there was no significant work done in 2021 to this point in time. And I do not anticipate significant work being done on them before the end of this calendar year. So, to wrap up the 2021 work plan, it was an ambitious work plan. Part of our time was spent on consolidating the gains and the structure out of our entire sustainability efforts while introducing some new ideas. There is no doubt that it was an incredibly challenging year because of the COVID-19 impacts, because council, rightfully so, inserted some new initiatives midstream that caused us to adjust. And of course, there are still the lingering effects because of our cyber recovery. The plate remains full, and it's a very large plate, I think is an appropriate way to describe the work plan for 2021. Therefore, moving on to 2022. The work plan for 2022 obviously has to take into account the new council priorities and adjust accordingly. And I trust that you will see that within this plan. We are still in a consolidation period from our restructuring efforts of 2020. For example, we have not yet landed on our final organizational structure for our Local 18 workforce. There's still work to be done there. We have not landed on our final structure for the fire department. We are still moving towards it. Those are simply 2 examples of the consolidation that needs to continue. We are still balancing workloads amongst our senior staff, our management and professional staff. We must carry forward the previous work plan initiatives. Our review of the new council priorities has not invalidated any of the previous work plan items. In fact, it is our opinion that if anything, it has reinforced the requirement for those work plan items. So they must be carried forward. The cyber attack is nearing completion in terms of our recovery efforts. I would no longer characterize it as a major impediment to our productivity, but it still requires attention. There are still certain parts of our IT infrastructure that still need to be addressed. Obviously, the pandemic continues, and nobody has a crystal ball to determine what the impact of that will be on 2021. And members of council, I must stress again that routine operations will remain our largest consumer of time, people, and money as we move forward. Therefore, for Work Plan 2022, which will include considerations into 2023, the reality is there are too many initiatives to complete in 1 year. We need to prioritize, and we must have a multi-year approach. That's not only to balance resources, but for example, to recognize the complexity of some of the initiatives. You do not develop a neighborhood plan, for example, in a 1 year period. It is categorically impossible because of the public engagement, public consultation, and analysis that must occur. The complexity of our issues forces us into a multi-year plan. Also, I will point out from the outset that there has been some intentional over-programming. There will be some slippage, but where we slip will depend on the situation and how it unfolds throughout the year. So we are once again taking a tiered approach. Tier 1 will be a 1 year horizon. The things that can be accomplished, completed by the end of 2022. Tier 2, a 2 year horizon. Those things that can be completed by the end of 2023. And Tier 3 will remain as resources permit. And when I speak about resources, it can be either time, people, or money, or any combination thereof. The work plan is based on your council priorities. And this work plan has been developed over the past few weeks once those council priorities had been approved. I think it's important, however, for me to make a very specific point. There is no direct linear correlation. An outcome in council priorities leads to an initiative. It doesn't work that way. In some cases it does, but in others it does not. Actually, the way we conduct daily operations will be influenced by those priorities and will deliver on outcomes. The example I would give is there is an outcome within council's priorities that says we must grow the tax rate to 3% and have it ever increasing there afterwards. There's no one initiative that addresses that outcome, but certainly the way we conduct daily operations, everything from how we do permitting to infrastructure development, to having site development ready sites, to our branding, to how we speak positively in everything that we do. All of that will contribute to that one outcome within council's priorities. So again, it's not linear. The other thing that directly contributes to council priorities is, of course, the capital and operating budgets. So once again, you will not see exact initiatives for every outcome because in some cases, we will simply address that council priority and the desired outcome through our budgeting processes. With that as a very long introduction, allow me to now introduce the work plan or the initiatives for 2022, Tier 1, that is to say we plan to have them complete by the end of the year. We will continue to develop and enhance our performance management system. We will need to review the municipal reform white paper when it is released, we are led to believe in November, and develop an action plan. If the white paper tells us to do a lot, then we have a lot of work to do. If the white paper does not give us a whole lot of initiatives, then we probably have a whole lot of work to do as well in terms of additional advocacy and additional requests for other ideas. We have done a tremendous amount on integrated customer service, but we want to take it to the next step and establish full operating capability. The 10-year strategic plan is a carry forward, and just to highlight what's at the bottom, anything in black is a carry forward from the previous year. Blue are the new aspects. So we must complete the 10-year strategic plan. We must complete the 10-year labor relations strategy. We had wished to complete the needs analysis for our new ERP system. We did not get to that, so we must do that. But we need to take the next step, which is also to begin the RFP process for that new system. We need to make and do a fundamental redesign of transit and also begin the implementation, certainly the initial phases, in 2022. We need to design and build Main Street as an active transportation corridor, but for that one, we are going to need very specific provincial approvals to get it done in 2022. The Affordable Housing Action Plan is a carry forward, as is the 10-year long-term financial plan for the water utility. This is a new one whereby we believe it's not simply good enough to say we will get better at recreation. We will challenge ourselves in 2022 to identify 5 new recreation programs or services, plan them out, and then make sure that those new programs or services are partially or fully funded in the next budget, the budget of 2023. And the City Market Strategic Plan is a carry forward. Last year, there was only 1 page of Tier 1 items. This year, there are 2. But before I go to the second page, I simply want to highlight on this slide, and I do not intend to speak to this at all, but the council priorities are at the top: grow, green, belong, move, and perform. And what we've done is we've taken an attempt at showing where each of these priorities will be reinforced by these 12 initiatives in Tier 1. And I'll just pause for everybody to quickly absorb that. Moving to page 2 of the Tier 1s. This is a carry forward, and that is to implement the initial phases of a new solid waste management system, of course, subject to council's approvals. Another carry forward is the development of the strategic communications plan. Associated with that and new is the mandate of council to develop and promote the City of St. John brand. We'll carry forward the requirement to finalize the strategies for Move SJ. We will carry forward the idea of developing a more refined grant financial policy for community grants. We are required, in accordance with the long-term financial plan, to update that plan in the coming year. We wish to develop a new building incentive program and expand it to the entirety of the PDA so that we are not just focused on the peninsula. And we want to couple that incentive program with our compliance efforts. The ride share that I've already spoken about needs to be carried forward and dealt with in the coming year, in fact, in the coming few months. We need to complete the job evaluations on our management and professional staff positions. That's a carry forward, as is the employee recognition program. We need to achieve the collective agreements for fire and police, and this may require binding arbitration with more to follow. We need to revise our procurement policy since it has not undergone revision for quite some time, and there are things that we can do within it to respect council's priorities. And finally, we need to complete the cyber recovery. Those members of council are the Tier 1 to be completed in 2022 objectives. It is a lengthy list, but because a large number of the items have already seen significant work, we believe it is achievable. And again, showing how this second page of Tier 1 items relates to the 5 primary priorities of council. Moving on to Tier 2. These initiatives, we are giving ourselves a 2-year horizon to complete. Again, either because we need to manage resources or because they simply take 2 years to complete. We need to continue to work on our asset management information system, and we need to enhance within it all of our efforts towards climate adaptation. You've been briefed on this broadly speaking, but continue to explore the potential of a district energy system. We need to continue to work on the Fundy Key project. We need to identify the next catalytic growth projects for the city and begin the drive to completion. To be clear on this one, it's not going to take us 2 years to identify the projects. That will be done in short order, but to begin the drive towards completion of those projects is a 2-year undertaking. We need to finalize the 15-year fire service strategy, which will be based on the fire service review that is currently ongoing, and then we need to begin the implementation. Again, it is the implementation that drives it into the second year. We want to continue to develop the implementation initiatives for the Central Peninsula Neighborhood Plan. A common misunderstanding is that we're done with the Central Peninsula Neighborhood Plan. We are not. The initial plan is in place. Now there are a number of additional implementation initiatives that need to be developed. And of course, the resources, and in particular the funding, needs to be made available to actually realize that plan. That said, we are well on our way on the Central Peninsula Neighborhood Plan, and it is time to develop the next neighborhood plan. And we believe that the next one in the hopper, excuse the expression, for those who are having flashbacks, ought to be the development of the neighborhood plan for the North End. We will need to complete our Local 486 collective bargaining, which is going to begin shortly, and carry forward the development of a multi-year capital budget. And again, for these tier 2s, you see how they relate to council's priorities. H2 of tier 2. We need to collaborate with Envision St. John for a renewed population growth strategy. We already have one. We've already seen the benefits of the one we have. It is indeed time to update it, however. We need to revitalize our industrial parks and our barge terminal through a deliberate process. We need to improve the model for the funding to and the programming at our community centers. We need to complete the planning for and continue the delivery of our truth and reconciliation initiatives. We need to develop an employment equity, diversity, and inclusiveness policy for the city workforce and its ABCs as appropriate. We do not have one. We have specific initiatives that we have in place, but an overarching policy does not yet exist. We need to consolidate some of our facilities in order to free up some other facilities for possible future development. And in particular, we wish to consolidate the operations of the transit facility and the Rothsay Avenue facility into one area. Of course, there's continued work required on climate change plans and initiatives, and specifically already approved and directed by council. We need to develop the governance and the staffing that is required to see those plans through to fruition. And finally, there is a carry forward, and this one is very much dependent on what the municipal reform white paper states, but we have a mandate to continue to explore opportunities for regional collaboration and cost sharing. And again, this now shows you the relationship to council priorities. Moving to tier 3, as time permits. We believe our employee performance management framework, how we evaluate, how we do our succession planning, how we do our professional development and training, needs to be revisited, and we'll do so if time permits. We have an excellent continuous improvement mentality and system in place, but we do believe it requires modification, and we'll get to it as time permits. Although we certainly have security at all our municipal facilities, the threat is continually changing, and therefore more work can and should be done in that regard. We still have an open item, a carry forward, to eventually take a look at our arenas and a path forward for them. And we also wish to develop a longer term vision for our waterfront, working carefully with the port in that regard. And you see how these tier 3s link to council's priorities. With that, members of council, I'll simply point out that the initiatives I've just described to you, there are 47 of them, if you wish to count them up. And actually, that's only part of the work plan, not the entirety of the work that your staff will undertake. The entirety of the work also includes those daily operations, and daily operations will be guided by council priorities, will be guided by budgets, and will be guided by fundamental philosophies that we share amongst the staff. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through each of these sayings. I think they speak for themselves, but each one of these is incredibly important as we work on the delivery of those daily operations, which again is the largest consumer of our time rather. And of course, we need to be prepared to conduct the emergency operations as required. So it is the initiatives, the daily operations, and the emergency operations that combined gives you the totality of the work plan. Members of council, that concludes the presentation. Subject to your questions, what I am seeking from you as your city manager is an endorsement of my city manager's initiative plan. It is my responsibility to administer the city on your behalf. Therefore, this work plan is my responsibility, but I certainly would wish your endorsement of it so that we can all move forward well aligned. And with that, Madam Mayor, I will stop sharing my screen and begin to take any questions people may have.
Thank you very much, City Manager. I just have to say that it's a really exciting time to be in a leadership role. It's work for us. It's a lot more work for staff. And it's wonderful really to have a strategic team and to have a strategic work team that's also, I mean, I just find our own staff is wonderful. They're well educated. They've got great experience. They're hard workers. They have to be when they look at this plan. I mean, it's amazing, but there are so many wonderful big moves and big initiatives in there for us. It does show that we're on a path. We can see where we're going. It has direction. It has a lot of things. And what I love the most is that number 7, and only number 7, as far as I could tell, hits all 5 of our priorities, which is the transit redesign. Anyway, no, listen, it's great. I'm very impressed with it. I think you've done a great job putting it together, and I'll turn it over. We've got a few hands up here from some of the councillors. Great work, John. Really great work. Let's see. I have Melanie Tompkins, but I know that hand is probably, I don't know why that's showing on my screen. So I'm going to skip that one and go down to Councillor Harris. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a couple of quick questions, Your Worship, to the city manager, and I want to make sure I echo Your Worship's comments to the city manager. There is certainly an extensive effort that's been done here to combine the trajectory of the previous council with the inertia and the desires of the new council and the new priorities, and that's no small feat. So thank you for all that hard work, city manager. My questions just go to a couple of specifics, and I'm more or less just looking for elaboration more than there's any criticism on them. When you mentioned the Main Street active transportation corridor, I think right now to drop that, this is my own opinion, but I think right now to drop that corridor on Main Street, as much as we certainly want, protected bike lanes and mobility lanes and more pedestrian-centered design on our city roads, it's a bit of it could be a bit of a red herring, is my thought, without a broader business value proposition around it. And so you mentioned the North End plan. And that was exciting to me because there's so much potential in our old North End especially. But do we have a sense of how we might tackle the needs of an active transportation route that is on Main Street with the need to connect arterially to other areas of the city, and what the business proposition is there to increase the density and create a unique value proposition along Main Street so that there's people living around Main Street who are asking and utilizing that potential new infrastructure. So I know that there's a bit of details in that, but I'm just looking for some elaboration on, why that's there and what some of the moving components of that are that you're hoping to zero in on in 2022. I guess.
So a couple quick thoughts for you, Councillor. First of all, this is not the totality of the active transportation that will be undertaken in the next couple of years. The rest of it falls into daily operations. What we are going to bring before council is the final strategy for active transportation, the bike lanes, the pedestrian enhancements, etc. And we have a plan within Move SJ that shows all of the bike lane structure moving forward so that we don't have a bike lane that goes from nowhere to nowhere without any connection to other places, etc. So the team has thought through the entirety of the active transportation network. The Main Street one in particular has been a desire of council for at least the last 4 years since I've been here, in terms of showing an iconic change to our mindset in terms of active transportation, because it's a highly visible corridor, and we believe that there's good value in using that corridor to help connect the North End to the Central Peninsula. That said, the approach we're taking within the capital plan is a very modest solution. Nobody should have an expectation that the active transportation corridor on Main Street is going to be gorgeous and incredibly fancy, and we're going to throw $3-4 million at it. We are not. In fact, the total allotment of funds right now is $500,000. We may have to go a bit higher than that. It's something more modest. It's to get it going, to see how it is used, and then tie it with the development of the North End plan and talk about the future beyond that. But we didn't want to wait another 2 years for the North End plan to be developed and then start to do something with Main Street. So that's the rationale behind it, Councillor.
That's excellent. Thank you, City Manager.
Councillor Hickey, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Certainly echo what you had mentioned, certainly what Councillor Harris had mentioned. City Manager, I think this is an exciting plan, and certainly, goes beyond even highlighting the daily operations and the grind of that, but to add such a significant piece to it is great. And it's nice to be redefining the hopper. This sounds like a good hopper, not a bad hopper like the last one we had. That one was scary. I'm good without it. I did have a quick question for you. Back in, I think, November of 2019, we had put a motion forward, or I had put a motion forward to council on a flyer delivery bylaw. Any insight on that or any update on that? Because then there was a subsequent motion afterwards. I just don't see it in the plan and would like to.
Again, Councillor, thank you for that. It's an excellent setup. That's routine operations at this point.
Oh, okay.
It was a motion of council. It's still on the books. We'll deal with it, but it's not a major initiative to sort out a bylaw for flyers. So it is another example of what's in our daily routine operations that doesn't quite meet the grade for these major initiatives.
Yeah, no, certainly a small livability piece, but just wanted to make sure it was.
It has not been forgotten.
Thank you.
Deputy, over to you, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. John, this is an excellent report. I love the way it's laid out. It shows our public, exactly what we've been doing and what we're going to do in the future and when we're going to do it and how it's going to align with our priorities. So well done. I just wanted to add to your comment about Main Street. It's actually been 8 years. So 4 years is doubled. But we look forward to that connection. And I think once we get that connection, the North End's really going to take off. It's starting now, but it's only just begun. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Councillor Redwan.
Thank you, Mayor Rudin. Through you to City Manager. It's definitely pretty jam-packed there. There's a lot in the books, and I do want to say how much that I appreciate all the work that you and staff have done over the last year, especially because the challenges that we've all experienced from COVID and then throw the cyber attack in there has definitely created a lot of challenges for you. I have to say, City Manager, I had thought before, why did John Cullen want to be the city manager? Our city manager is a retired two-star general, ran a massive energy company, and now is in little old St. John managing the city. And I just have to say that, because I know that you're not originally from here, when you start talking about your plan and the work plan and how passionate you are about it, I'm just so appreciative of it. And so, I answered my own question a little while ago, thinking, it's just your drive. You actually just want the you know, if you want a challenge, then come try to run the city of St. John, especially when you guys were dealing with all these hoppers last year. It was just unbelievable. And so, you know, I just wanted to say how much I really appreciate your work, and I look forward to seeing how you really utilize the great staff that you have working under you, empowering them to do the best that they can, because that's been, you know, that's been great to watch, and I look forward to seeing what happens in the next couple of years.
Councillor, I feel obliged to comment. First of all, thank you for your comments. But secondly, I need to tell you that the work plan that I would have presented to you this evening would have been much smaller, less ambitious, less impressive, if you want to use that word, if we were dealing with what I would consider an average staff here. We have a staff here that goes the extra country mile all the time, and therefore I feel quite confident putting together a very ambitious, very interesting plan that the community will benefit from, not because of me, but because you are blessed with a team of management and professional staff that is second to none. And I've been involved with a lot of them in my career, as you have hinted at. And more importantly, or equally important, you have a workforce across the board that is willing to step up and deliver on all of the daily operations and the implementation of these initiatives. If this was an average team, you would see an average work plan.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for comments.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Radwan. Nice words. When you work as hard as our staff does, it is nice to hear that they are appreciated and that their work is recognized. Any more questions for the city manager? Councillor Ogden, you had a question? You're on mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to say how happy I am about Main Street. Next year's our 25th year of marigolds and murals, and we started on Main Street with both the mural and marigolds from Centennial School. And in the letter, the proposal, when we asked if Main Street could be narrowed and if we could clean up Robertson Square and work on the other end of Main Street, which people often forget. But I'm really, really pleased that Main Street will be going ahead and that North End Plan is going ahead, because it is an absolutely beautiful area surrounded by rivers and the Bay of Fundy, Reversing Falls, and it has parks like St. Peter's, the park on Douglas Avenue, Shamrock Park, Rockwood Park, and it has absolutely beautiful buildings that I hope we can save as many as possible, because it's a really unique neighborhood, and it had great days, and those great days are about to return. So I'm really, really pleased about that the North End is going to be a focus of our attention. Thank you.
And your worship, if I may, Councillor Ogden's comments have reminded me of a point. We say that we will develop the neighborhood plan for the North End. We have not said the old North End. We have yet to define exactly what we're going to talk about when we talk about the North End, but it will certainly be, it will include the old North End, but I suspect we will be coming to you with a proposal to broaden well beyond that when we talk about the neighborhood plan for the North End. There are areas there that are already seeing significant growth that we need to reinforce, and we need to address those areas that also need assistance. So it is, I just want to make the point, it is more than the old North End we are talking about when we talk about developing the next neighborhood plan. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. It's important. And it is great that Main Street will link the North End with the peninsula. We need that. Any more questions or comments? If not, I'd take a motion to endorse with and applaud the city manager's work plan. Councillor Radwan and Councillor Ogden. On the question, all in favor? Yes, I agree, Councillor Harris. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Thanks so much, everyone. Appreciate it. John, extend our congratulations and our gratefulness to your staff for putting this together with you, and for the initiative that's going to take to get it completed. It's going to be an amazing journey for us over the next 3 years. It's to have those optics of some of those things that will really demonstrate that St. John has, well, we've already turned that corner, but just thinking of things differently and doing business differently. I think a lot of it's in there. There's a lot of big moves. Thanks again. All right, City Clerk, over to you. Excuse me, over to you. Next item.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next item is 12.2 on the agenda, and this is a staff report, Dominion Park Master Plan Phase 1 implementation.
City Manager, this is over to you to introduce.
Yes, please, Your Worship, members of council. Dominion Park and the improvements to this district park that we have has been a subject of discussion, again, certainly since the time I've been here, and I know well before that. It has received a number of challenges along the way, including different competing interests, different visions as to the path forward, and that, quite frankly, has served to prevent any development of that park in any meaningful way over the past years. The situation has now changed dramatically. There has been the creation of a community association that has very much helped to drive and develop a unified vision for looking forward, which was a fundamental piece of this. They have been working very closely and collaborating with the city staff to try to enable that vision, because again, and you've heard me say this before, a vision without resources is nothing but a hallucination. And therefore, trying to find a way to properly resource this so that we could see significant progress is also important. And I'm happy to say that it also now lines up very neatly with council's priorities, where council has said to continue to maintain our district parks, but focus in on Dominion Park. So this evening, you're going to have Director Phil Willett give you a presentation on the way ahead for Dominion Park. I wanted to introduce this instead of the commissioner introducing it, because I wanted to make a point that the effort behind this has been much more than just our growth and community services team. Everyone in the organization has contributed to this, be it infrastructure, be it our parks department, be it our public works, even being our safety organizations. So this evening, you're seeing a team result of a path forward for Dominion Park that I hope you will be supportive of, and we'll be seeking a necessary motion in that regard towards the end of the presentation. And with that as the introduction, it's now my pleasure to introduce Director Phil Willett to provide you with the overall briefing.
Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Willett.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, City Manager. Okay, does everybody see this slide?
We can see it.
Great. So through your worship to council, staff are very excited to be here today at this exciting juncture of this project. I'll start with just indicating that the reinvestment into a park may appear simple at first glance, but the ability to arrive to a direction on a park reinvestment involves a lot more than just available funds, as you need council and community leadership, consultation, consensus, partnership, trust, a plan, and a vision. The recommendations found in the report today were developed in partnership with the Dominion Park Community Association and received the endorsement of the association. Before going any further, I think it's important to acknowledge Play SJ and its centrality in guiding any discussions as it relates to parks. Dominion Park is one of 7 district parks in St. John, which are to be prioritized by the plan for its natural features, location, and draw from the broader community. As you are likely aware, Play SJ clarifies that it is not our objective to make comparable investments into every single park in green space across St. John, as it would provide very weak regular investment, maintenance, and operational significance across the board versus high impact on the highest impact assets. Just a little overview for those of you less familiar with Dominion Park. The existing status of Dominion Parks is that there are lifeguards there throughout the summer. There are mobile change rooms and bathrooms. Our sunshine program, our playground program do operate out of the park. Picnic tables and benches are there. Covered areas are there for picnic tables. We also have the Timber Top Adventures as a lease with the city there, and we also have a playground. So as the city manager indicated, there is a little history on this one. It goes back to 2014 when the initial planning started, and it did take some time to catch on. And I hate to say it from a timeline standpoint, but the flood really did bring the community together and the community to state its time for action. And 2 years of flooding created that, and it did eventually impact the existing facility on site. So with that, there was a variety of steps that were taken, including, as the city manager indicated, the creation of the Dominion Park Community Association, which turned into the master planning exercise, which involved extensive consultation, as well as design chariots, among others. And this association met monthly for 22 months. In 2021, it moved into fundraising and further refining of design. And I know that I've participated in biweekly meetings for the last 2.5 months with the association. Just a little bit on the Dominion Park Association. I don't want to get into too much detail, but this is really a unique partnership between an association and the city. The group was formed, as I mentioned, at a time that the park needed the help the most. And did they ever respond? They formed they didn't want to just talk about what the city can do for the park, but instead what is best for the park and how can we collectively contribute to the ends of that park. The association led development of a master planning exercise, building awareness and ownership across the community. They heard the community very much were interested in replacing the former facility, including washrooms and change rooms, and space for lifeguards and canteen facilities. The plan also acknowledged the need to phase out the various components, as there were many goals that were being sought by those involved. So here's some of the images. I'm not going to go through all the images in detail because I have a surprise for you at the end, which is a little video. Phase one of the master plans illustrates an important upgrade to the previous facility at Dominion Park. It offers a vision consistent with the feedback established by the master planning exercise. The renderings highlight a modern and welcoming new facility with a spectacular new sunset lookout design, convenient sea can change rooms, various seating options, landscaping that integrate existing vegetation with new features, and an accessible walkway system that creates linkages to the various facets of the beach. So some of the design that you'll see today have been adapted since the master plan was rolled out last year. And I wanted to just briefly touch on how those came about. We hired Glenn Group to do additional review and analysis and design. And there was 5 outcomes that came out of that. One was that the seawall was not a prerequisite to the development, that additional fill could do it, which saved a lot of money to the design. The other one was, and we had actually thought that this was the better option, that a movable option was a preferred option for the site in order to mitigate potential flooding. And after review, the movable sites might actually turn out to be more expensive than a permanent site. So we said, let's stick with the permanent site. We also indicated that in order to enhance, one of the key themes of the master planning exercise was that accessibility needed to be a priority, and placing 2 stories on the facility would be a detriment to that without installing the necessary of an elevator for that second story. The other point was that installing a commercial kitchen was likely too much of an investment, and one that should be borne off of the private sector potential leasee of any space on municipal property. But an eatery space was in order in terms of what is a core offering to the community. Lastly, and one of the most surprising impacts of this analysis was that the total project went from 1.8 million to just over 1 million. So a massive change in scale of the cost, which made this much more palatable for the community association to complete the fundraising that they needed to do in order to do this, which they're still doing, as well as the available projected capital investment that the city had in place. Before going any further, it should be noted that these renderings will change as we progress through more detailed design. In addition, one facet that we intend to make is to increase the distance between the new facility and the existing timber top adventure building. So I'll just go through a couple of these images that you see here. This is the new sunset lookout that's been redesigned, and the Secan change rooms. It should also be noted before I go any further that the future phases of the master plan contemplate a playground, a lookout deck, boat launch, and potential for a dock and some outdoor recreational courts, all of which will be pursued after this initial phase. Oh, let's dive in a little bit to the money. As I indicated, the price has been refined to just over $1 million, your agenda package includes a cost estimate from Glen Group, which includes an additional $300,000 that is not included in this phase, which needs to be highlighted, which includes picnic shelters, additional site furnishing, and overhead lighting. The community association's fundraising efforts, the projected investment from the city, and the different capital funds amount to a total of $971,000 towards the project. Therefore, there's a shortfall of about $74,000 to successfully finance the scope of this phase one. But the community association and the city staff are not worried about it. We think that we will be able to fulfill this small gap because we have a variety of irons in the fire. Number one, the city has applied to ACOA, to RDC. The association continues its fundraising campaign. The association has an application into the anniversary grant with the St. John Community Loan Fund for $45,000. And the city staff has proposed an additional $200,000 as part of the city's 2022 capital budget to support potential funding shortfalls and contingencies with this phase one. It's also just worth mentioning that in terms of operations and maintenance, because the project is so similar to what was there previously, an operation and maintenance plan was not required from the association. If there are extra maintenance and operational costs placed on the city as a result of the master plan implementation, the association will be required to put in a maintenance and operational plan and find necessary funds and revenues from their own source to fund these additional. But nothing in this plan indicates that they are required to do that at this stage. In terms of timelines, in the event council adopts the staff recommendation today and council adopts the 2022 capital budget investment into Dominion Park, staff will proceed immediately to final design of phase one. Construction would be expected to start as soon as the ground thaws in spring and seek completion in 2022. It should also be noted that the Community Association does intend to build further awareness of the updated plans and what the community can expect in 2022, which will be rolled out in the coming weeks and months. And also, once construction begins, we will certainly be providing public notification of dates and times, as well as necessary on-site considerations to maintain access and minimize major disruption for neighbors, park users, and customers of Timbertop Adventure. I did want to quickly provide some recognition. There have been a tremendous amount of work placed into this, as I mentioned at the start of the presentation. First off, from the Dominion Park Community Association, Derek, David, Tony, Jennifer, Wanda, Madden, and Brian all played a very significant role in this to mobilize the community and build awareness. On the city staff front, Greg Cutler, Nancy Moore, and Tim O'Reilly have played a significant role in supporting this. I think it's worth mentioning that JDI Limited has supported this project with a very generous $100,000 contribution. Those who have contributed to this through the fundraising campaign of the Dominion Park Community Association are also thanked for this. And also council priorities for establishing this in their own priorities illustrates that council leadership. The recommendations from the report are to endorse the Dominion Park Phase 1 implementation, contingent on the approval of the general fund, of the general capital fund, and also to recommend that the Common Council co-sign the Dominion Park Community Association's $45,000 application to the anniversary grant from the St. John Community Loan Fund. And with that, I'm going to exit and attempt to show you a short video.
I love that summer feeling. I don't want it ever leaving. Breathing in the sky that's so clear. I could spend my whole life right here. I love that summer feeling. Now I'm here, I'm never leaving. Everything is possible right here. I love that summer feeling. Now I'm here, I'm never leaving. Everything is possible right here. I love that let go feeling. I feel my hands up on the ceiling. I think I'll spend tomorrow out here. 'Cause days like these feel like I'm dreaming. Yeah, ooh, I love that summer feeling. Now I'm here, I'm never leaving. Everything is possible right here. I love that summer feeling. Now I'm here, I'm never leaving. Everything is possible right here. I love that summer feeling. Now I'm here, I'm never leaving. Everything is possible right here. I love that let go feeling. I feel my hands up on the ceiling. I think I'll spend tomorrow out here. 'Cause days like these feel like I'm dreaming. Yeah, ooh, I love that summer feeling. Now I'm here, I'm never leaving.
With that, that concludes my presentation, and happy to take any questions.
You're on mute, Mayor.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Mr. Willett. Councillor Radwan.
Thank you, Mayor Reardon. I just had one question, Director Willett. Thank you for that. I was just wondering when the last time the prices would have been added up for this project. Of course, the prices of everything keep going up, as we all know.
Through your councillor to council, these recent estimates are just about a month old, so they're most recent, and they do have some contingency as a basis of them as well.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I'm in full support of this. It's wonderful, and I appreciate you giving recognition to the Dominion Park Community Association, because I know they've been quite involved and very passionate about it. I appreciate all the work the staff have done.
Councillor Killen.
Well, it's a happy day for the West Side for sure. Phil, thank you so much for putting this all together very strategically. And as a newer councillor, it was a thrill to witness sort of how these kinds of things can play out after a lot of time, and seeing how much work has gone into it is incredible. So I think just as a general note, it's really great to see an association form in a grassroots way and then come to create something that's so impactful for the surrounding community, that's focused on recreation and, you know, all those really wonderful things, and emboldening this sunshine program. So I'm so excited, and I know a lot of Westsiders are really excited tonight as well to see this. So I just want to, you know, give a big shout out to all of you and to the association. I think this story can be replicated all around the city. So I know very well that the association here is happy to share their secrets, if you will, on how to be successful. So great work all around.
Thank you, Councillor Killen. Councillor Norton, this has been one of your babies for a while. I've been hearing about it since I've been on council.
You're on mute, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship, for those comments. It's I said to our Madam Mayor, I said it's probably been an unhealthy obsession for a few years now, and we've seen different iterations of this. But there's not much I want to pick apart with this, other than a few. I do want to say a few thanks. Quite a few Fridays we've spent, I know, with Phil and his team on many calls, getting updates with the Glen Group, and those have been a pleasure to attend. So all of those sidebar meetings that we've had, getting to this point, this stage, going back, Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, the last 6 months we've had multiple updates. So it's one of those things that I've always enjoyed seeing pop up in my calendar, and getting those. So it's taken a lot of people in a lot of different spaces to pull this together. I do want to say thanks to the Greater St. John Community Foundation for helping drive some of the fundraising efforts. There's people on this council who have provided financial donations to this project, and you know who you are, and I want to thank you. And those people quietly give and make a difference in our community, and it's not about the name recognition for them, but I want to tip my hat to those folks for doing that, along with our corporate partners who have provided $100K infusion right out of the gates to inject positive money into this to get this rolling. I want to thank, obviously, Phil and his team, and along with some of the private investors that have helped put a nice framework around our park to make it sustainable, and we know who those people are as well. But most of all, I want to thank the Dominion Park community. Going back 10 years when I first got on council, one of my most anticipated community events was going to the Dominion Park beach cleanup, and those beach cleanups were always well received. Of course, there was good, for lack of a better word, fellowship around those. But they always left the park better than they found it, until they were able to get something in sync such as this. And I think Councillor Killen has already said it, that it's a model that can be duplicated. And right now we're seeing the Friends of Seaside Park already have some sit-down fireside chats about what was done here so that we can duplicate this over there. And it goes right back to Play SJ in terms of how community ownership can do a better job than our municipality in terms of taking a park and really making it a destination. And it's not to say that the municipality can't, but it's to say that the community is more well equipped to really take it to that next level. So this is an awesome night for me. I've been really looking forward to this. I'm genuinely happy about it. And there's too many people to thank, and I'm one small spoke in a massive wheel, and the smallest spoke at that. But I look forward to the next Dominion Park beach cleanup and shovels in the ground. So thank you all.
On that note, Councillor Norton, I'll get you to move the recommendation then.
So moved, Your Worship.
And Councillor Killen, you'll second it for me. All right. On the question, all in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried, and congratulations. Thanks, Phil. Great job to you and your team. All right. City Clerk, next item.
Yes, next item, Your Worship, is 12.3 on your agenda. It's another staff report, alternate side parking program, north, east, and west side.
Okay, this one I'm passing over to Mr. Hugenholtz. This is just a receive and file tonight. So, and he'll explain that, and then we can move on. Mr. Hugenholtz, over to you.
Yes, thank you, and good evening, Your Worship, members of council. As you mentioned, the item before you this evening requires no decision on your part. It's simply receive and file. Just by way of background, when we did updates to our traffic bylaw back in 2009, We did make a change to the alternate side parking program at that time. This would have applied to the north, east, and west areas of the city, and that was done to be consistent with the program in the South Central Peninsula. It was done as well at the time due to some feedback from the community at that time. So since those changes were implemented, Council did receive at least 2 pieces of correspondence with residents who had concerns about those changes that were made. They were referred to the city manager. So it's the intent of staff to undertake a more thorough public consultation process. We are considering a few different options for those areas, including status quo. So once we've had a chance to better check the pulse of the community in terms of their desires, we will be coming back to council with a recommendation. With that, I'll turn it back to the common clerk, subject to your questions, of course.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hugenholtz. I do appreciate staff's efforts to try to standardize what's happening, but I think this approach, as you say, taking the public consultation and doing that more in depth will get us to the answer that we need of how this is going to work, alternate side parking for across the city. So I have a question from Councillor Hickey. City Manager, did you have your light on for anything?
Yeah, Your Worship, forgive me. I believe Mike Hugenholtz, Commissioner Hugenholtz mentioned in 2009. It was in 2019 that we did this, and we've received 2 comments since, or 2 letters that were referred to the city manager. So this is just your update to say, we haven't lost this, we haven't forgotten about this. We're going to do some additional public engagement, and then we'll get back to you.
Good. Councillor Hickey?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wonder, Tim, is there any consideration in those areas of, like, I just worry on a pilot project like this, like on a public awareness campaign like this, like just getting very one-sided stuff out of it. Is there any understanding of piloting it initially or having any effort that way?
Well, again, one of the things we want to do this time is to give the opportunity for everybody to provide their input, but the public has to provide their input in order for us to make a decision. So that's what we're trying to achieve this time around. I've had a lot of one-on-one conversations with members of the community already over the last couple of years, so I'm going to take that into consideration as well. But certainly we want a consensus, or look for consensus from the public as to how to proceed going forward. Certainly one of the options among the 3 or 4 that we have in the report is the idea of going with a standardized approach, but looking at individual cases on a case-by-case basis. So again, if we get that feedback from the public that that's the way to go, then we'll bring that as part of our recommendations back to council. Certainly, if there's a fragmented level of input from the community, we'll certainly bring that back to council as well to see where to go forward. But certainly, there are members of the community that want this decided and firmed up. So we do want to get that final decision, but certainly there are a couple of options that allow for some flexibility in terms of the approach on a case-by-case basis.
And Your Worship, if I may, through you to the councillor, we have a pretty good understanding of what does and doesn't work in terms of public consultation, and certainly we are cognizant of the risk that you may hear from a vocal minority as opposed to the entire majority. So we need to look at that. But I wanted to mention a plug actually for our new software that's coming online. This will be one of the first times that we will use our new software application, Shape Our City, also known as Bang the Table in some communities, to actually help with that public engagement process. So we're quite excited about that and see what sort of investment and involvement we get from that community through that form of public consultation. But we have a number of different tools we can use, including online surveys, etc., if we're not getting the input that we need. And certainly we'll have a bit of a communications campaign behind this to make sure that the public is aware that we truly do want their input before we bring this back to council. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. Councillor Deputy McKenzie.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I really like this report and the possibility of moving forward with this. There's one area though that I'd like to see added to it, and that's right off of University Avenue, not University Avenue. Jerry, help me out here, will you? Tartan Street, I'm sorry, Tartan Street.
Tartan Street,
Been
John.
talking about Tartan Street now for a couple of years, and this would be a prime time to add it in if we could, Tim. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is, to David's point, you know, I see value if you can pilot your program at the same time that you're getting input from the public. That way they have an opportunity to try what you want to input and give you feedback after trying it. That's just my thought. I think there's value to what David said to that.
No, thanks, Deputy Mayor, and certainly your second point, we'll take that under consideration because it's been brought up now by two different councillors. Certainly on your first question, as part of the survey with the Shape Your City survey, we're going to be asking specifically what other streets beyond the streets that are part of the program now might be applicable for this program. So you're right, Deputy, I've had lots of conversations with you and other members of Tartan Street that this might be an option for that street. Absolutely, you know, we settle on that solution, but we are asking as part of this survey if there's other streets beyond the program that might be applicable. So we'll get that input from the community as well, but absolutely could be beyond the streets that we currently have in the program.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. All right, if there are no other questions, I'll take a receive and file motion. Councillor Hickey and the deputy on the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, City Clerk, next item.
Your Worship, next we have under committee reports, item 13.1 from the Finance Committee, the 2022 Draft General Fund and Utility Fund Capital Budget. The Chair of the Finance Committee will speak to this.
Okay, over to you, Councillor Sullivan. This is a receipt for your information, so take it away.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Proud to speak to you on behalf of your Finance Committee, made up of Mayor Reardon, Councillors Radwin, Norton, and Hickey. Before us tonight is our capital budgets for our utility and our operating fund for receive and file, so that there's an opportunity for councillors to ask questions or present concerns. And then ultimately in 2 weeks' time, we will have it before us again, hopefully to pass those budgets and get them operational. We have learned in the past that the earlier we get our capital budgets approved, it does give us financial advantage because we can get our tenders out sooner. So before us, this is our capital budget. It is an investment in long-term improvements to assets such as facilities and infrastructure that have paid over a long period of time to match their useful life. We will be bringing back the operating budget in the coming weeks, which is the budget for the day-to-day expenses for the day-to-day functioning of city business. It has been approved by Finance Committee, and that is why it's before us tonight. Council has already seen the quality of life investments, and they have been fully integrated into the 2022 proposed general fund capital budget. Between the general fund and utility fund capital budget, there is approximately $43.6 million of investment. Important to note, of that $43.6 million, only $9 million is new borrowing, and approximately $20 million is leveraged funding from other levels of government. Thank you very much to our partners at the other levels of government. Compliant with Council's financial policies, including our asset management policy, 85% of our budget is renewal and 15% is new infrastructure. Following our financial plan with regards to capital and borrowing is providing us with over $700,000 extra in our operational budget just this year. Just one benefit of following our financial plan. General fund capital budget is a little over $29 million. Our city share is $12.8 million, with the other share being $16,657,000, $13.1 million coming from other levels of government. This connects to our priorities. Belong and Move has $6.2 million in quality of life, focused on investments based on our various strategic plans. Dominion Park, we've already talked about. Phase 3 Rockwood Park Master Plan, Marketplace West District Park, Little River Reservoir beautification, upgrades to Forest Hills Playground, protected bike lanes on Main Street, converting South Market Street to a pedestrian street, improvements to Market Slip, extending the intersection of Sydney Street and Broadview Avenue to Tin Can Beach for Harbor Passage, greening grass medians, now planting pedestrian bump outs, sporting enhancements to city fields and courts, and our arts and culture will get investments to recognize the city's diversity. Our priority of green has $1.6 million investment for the city's transition to curbside recycling. We are advancing our council priority of move with investments of $650,000 in St. John Transit for the installation of a system to provide real-time vehicle locations, automatic passenger counting, and next stop announcements. We're advancing our council priority of growing green with over $3.2 million investment in combined storm sewer separation. Our priority of move has continued investment in roads, sidewalks, and curb renewal at $2.2 million, in addition to $4.8 million in street reconstructions. Approximately $1.5 million is being invested to improve public safety with investments in modernized records management systems and next generation 911 systems. Approximately $5.4 million is investment into city facilities that will advance council's priority of green by reducing the city's carbon footprint with investments in energy retrofits at various city facilities and investment in an HVAC system and lighting. Continued asset management renewal at various city facilities, as well as replacement of the St. Patrick Street escalator. Our priority of perform as investments in fleet and IT infrastructure funded out of reserves and not through debt by way of the city replacement program. And our utility fund budget is $14 million, a little over, with $6.5 million funded with pay-as-you-go and about $7.7 million from other sources. So perform over $14 million in capital investment in our utility budget with no new borrowing. We have focused on asset management to address the utilities infrastructure deficit, including vintage underground utilities, replacement of a pumping station at the end of its useful life, reconstruction of lift stations above flood levels for climate change, or lift stations at the end of useful life, replacing roofs at several facilities, and sewer separation aligned with the general fund and investment in an asset management system. Those are the highlights. Staff is available for questions, and the motion is to receive and file. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. I do have a question from Councillor Hickey. Councillor Hickey.
Your Worship, I just wanted to move the motion. Certainly we discussed this at the Finance Committee. I consider it to be an absolute home run. It's very exciting to, finally be able to put a budget forward after some tough years that shows, what a better growth rate can do, and what an excitement in a growing city can do in turn, and this is that, and I'm very excited to be able to move it, I guess, if I can.
Excellent. I'll take a seconder on that motion then, and then we'll go to the last question. Deputy seconding it. Over to you, Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's certainly a lot in here that we can be confident in and be excited about. My concern, and I'm not sure if this is address a question, because I know this is a receive and file in preparation for a budget adoption at a later date. One, I'm a little concerned that we never really had any options on the quality of life expenditures for the gas tax funding that we got, which was a one-time infusion. It was more or less, here it is in a draft, here's what we're thinking, and now here it is coming again on a fast track. I personally think that is the role of councillors in governance, to be able to say where we need more expenditures, because not all places and not all people were hit equally in this last 2 years. in a negative way. And we need to make sure that we're putting effort into those places that were hit hardest and those communities that have been hit hardest. And so I'll give you an example. When we're talking about street reconstructions, the $14.5 million that Councillor Sullivan laid out for us, I am a little bit concerned that we don't necessarily have the right lens. We have Director Tim O'Reilly and his traffic engineering team that is fairly under-resourced, and we've continually had pushback and concerns on how these streets look, what the outcome of them is. Take Waterloo, for example. Waterloo is 10 times better than it was, that entire corridor. It still could be quite a different type of street when we look at other cities with that prioritize pedestrian-centered design and in residential design, which is actually what that street is. Yes, there's some commercial on it. Yes, there's some business around it. No question. But
what's your question though? Like,
well, my question is, what guarantees do we have that this $14.5 million is going to be expended to give us the outcome we're looking for? And what outcome is that we're looking for? When does that come? Because right now, as stands, if we're just going to redo a bunch of those streets without the traffic calming lens, without the pedestrian-centered design lens, it's $14.5 million that we're spending in the wrong direction. That's where my question is where does that come in? What lens are we building for and toward? I understand we have our priorities, but in recent history, we've done a project that had some pushback. Waterloo was that, had some concerns brought up by this council, or sorry, by the previous council, and here we are. So that's my concern.
Let's get staff to answer that. I guess to a certain extent, I mean, some of that stuff that we are doing has to be done if it's stormwater separation, et cetera, on some of these streets, but I can send that over to staff if you would like. Is there?
Your worship, maybe I'll begin and then I'm going to ask a couple of others to comment through you to the councillor. The role of staff is to advise council. So we take the funds that are available to us and try to make best use of those funds based on council priorities, but also based on conditions of our infrastructure and our infrastructure deficit. So we certainly understand the passion that has been displayed and the reflection of our community by certain councillors about more emphasis on active transportation, more emphasis on ease of pedestrianization. But that also needs to be balanced by the requirements of our vehicles. And, you know, we've said this often, the vast majority of St. Johners still consider their car as their primary mode of transportation. And we also do it based on an analysis of our infrastructure, where we evaluate all of our asphalt and figure out where the next road reconstruction should occur. We evaluate all of our underground utilities through inspections and other life cycle management tools that we have to determine where the emphasis should be there. So the recommendations that were brought forward within this capital budget, first of all, the $6 million for quality of life was a motion of council to dedicate that $6 million to quality of life and not to infrastructure renewal. The remainder of the capital budget was divided up based on our analysis of where the money ought to be spent. I would invite Commissioner Brent McGovern, who's responsible for our infrastructure, to say a few words. And then also, because it's an important point, it's certainly an important question. After Commissioner McGovern, I'd invite Commissioner Hugenholtz to talk a little bit more about our road reconstruction program. Starting with Commissioner McGovern, please.
Thank you. Good evening. As the city manager mentioned, we do look at the underground infrastructure, and so we video approximately 65 kilometers of underground infrastructure a year, and that helps set our priorities. So when you look at the project descriptions, you'll see different condition ratings in the description. Many of them either 3, 4, or 5, in most cases for sewer, which means that it's in terrible condition, a lot of them terracotta sewers. So a lot of the capital program goes back to the bilateral funding applications that we put in, geez, probably 2 or 3 years ago now, and that has set the course for approximately 5 years as it relates to city street renewal, and that renews critical infrastructure, storm and sewer gets separated. It renews our water infrastructure, and it changes the streetscape. And so when we look to what does the streetscape need to be, we look to guiding documents that are already adopted by council, that being the secondary peninsula document and the neighborhood plan for that area. And that is one, for example, where Charlotte Street is going to be getting rebuilt from one end to the other. That's a complete street. And so that's something that the cross-section design will be coming back to council for consideration in advance of that getting constructed. But when we build something like that, we want it to be connected on another end to an active transportation network, for example. And in this case, in the case of like Charlotte Street, for example, it will connect down into Harbor Passage that is being extended as part of this capital program. But also there's another phase of Harbor Passage that's also being extended as well, which was actually part of the 2020 capital program, and that's in along Fundy Key. So hopefully that's provided some context in terms of how we arrive at all the various streets. And I guess in summary, this sewer does have a big role to play in driving the reconstruction, because once you get into that, you tend to get into full reconstruction because of how the pipes are constructed in the street. That once you get into replacing the sewer, the water main is close by, and typically those streets have asphalt sidewalks and asphalt curbs as well, which is what we're into for the most part here on a lot of these street reconstructions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hugenholtz, are you going to chime in as well?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, through you to the councillor. I guess I would just underline what Commissioner McGovern did say. So out of that huge capital program, especially when you look at all the street work, all the storm sewer work, etc., it is mainly those two driving factors which is determining that whole program. The risk of failure on the infrastructure side, as well as the development pressures that we're trying to stay ahead of. So that basically covers, the vast majority of our program. And the other, I guess the other big aspect is our street resurfacing contract. So that's typically funded partially through the general fund capital budget, which you have before you this evening, but mostly this year funded through our operating budget. So that's a step forward in terms of how that's funded. But that's a program that's driven by the pavement condition index. So that is something that's measured on every street in the city every single year. And it's basically from an asset management perspective, we look at where does that investment need to go. The goal with that program is not targeting any kind of specific level of service or anything like that. It's purely to maximize the use of that asphalt. So to minimize our costs over the long term. So every single year, we do look through our road network. We look at those pavement condition indices and we determine, okay, which are the ones that are coming up for renewal, which are the ones that need to be done this year so they don't fall into a more costly reconstruction category. When we do that, it doesn't give us sort of all of the options that a full street reconstruction would. We are limited in terms of where that basic infrastructure is. Generally speaking, the curb lines can't change unless we get into changes to our catch basins and underground infrastructure. But what that program does do is renews our entire asphalt. And typically as we go through, because it acts as a system, we are also getting into removal and replacement of the old asphalt curbs and sidewalks where they do exist. So the program does end up having a significant impact on the look of the community. And certainly when we do that, we also look at, are there opportunities working within the existing right-of-way for actors transportation? And mainly, does that fit within our plan? Because we do have, you know, a cycling strategy, for example, in Move SJ, which will be coming to you before the end of this year for adoption. You know, we look at, does this street call for a bike lane there? And if so, we look to see if we can incorporate it as part of that work. I hope that offers some additional context for you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
It does, Your Worship. It gives me some context, but to be honest, I'm still not necessarily understanding how are we applying the Vision Zero lens and whatnot to what we have already. I understand that when pipes need to get replaced and it's going to cause a spillover effect to have a bunch of reconstruction, that of course makes sense. I just think we have a lot of people in this city that are calling for action on more accessible streets, and I'm not necessarily seeing how that trickles down. It could be there. I'm not saying staff is at fault. It could be that it's just I'm not seeing how it trickles down, and I'll just leave that for a different conversation.
Yes, and maybe you, okay, oh, sorry, City Manager.
Sorry, Your Worship. I think one last point might be useful in terms of context. Just to remind Council that we do have a financial policy that clearly states that 85% of all capital money must go to renewing existing infrastructure. So new ideas, new things, we have a limit of 15% on any given year. And in fact, until this year, the limit was 10%. So I understand there's a lot that this community would want, not the least of which is, for example, new recreational facilities. We need to manage within our means, and we still have an incredible infrastructure deficit that we're trying to address. So again, the staff, I think, works very hard to try to get best value for the limited dollars that we do have, and we bring that forward to Council for review and comment. And for example, there is opportunity, without doubt. Tonight is a receive and file. If certain councillors would wish us to provide them additional information on any of the projects or have additional comments on any of the projects, then there is the period between now and the vote, if you will, for members of council to have those discussions with staff members, and we can provide that additional information and listen to the concerns and see if there are ways to mitigate it. But at the end of the day, there's a limited pot of money, as we all appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat Wood, who was our city manager when I first came on the job, always used to say, I didn't like this. You can only spend $1 once. It was a hard fact you had to come to grips with. All right, I guess I've got Councillor Radwan up, and then Councillor Hickey, are you on as well after that? Okay, Councillor Radwan.
Thank you, Mayor Reardon. So I had actually, it's just a receive and file, I know, but I did vote against it because I had some concerns during finance. Thank you to Commissioner Hugenholtz for sending me some information on the Rockwood Park investment. It is a lot of money, $1.8 million for Rockwood Park. I'm not sure that I totally have a visual on what it's going to look like from what the information I've gotten. One thing that I do have, and I will say that Chair Sullivan had mentioned that he hasn't gotten complaints about it. I actually have from residents. So I still have a bit of concern there. One thing that I also, of course, as you guys very well know, I'm worried about the solid waste management system that's going to possibly come into play. And I guess that my concern with this budget is the $1.6 million that's going to be put out there for garbage cans. And if council does not agree with the way that things are going to work, where it's probably only about 2 bags per household for a 2-week pickup in most areas, where could we find money to do anything else?
So to answer the councillor's question, the solid waste management program has to come back to council for approval of council. Should council not approve it or require significant changes to it, which has a budgetary impact, then we may have a budgetary shortfall if we need to do more, or we may have a budgetary surplus if the direction of council is to do something different. In either eventuality, that becomes an in-year adjustment to the budget that will be presented to council for their decision.
Thank you, City Manager.
I have just one other question. Just wondering if there's any plan on getting any sort of drainage basins, or if I could ask maybe Commissioner McGovern, probably around McAllister Drive, Rosse Avenue, Bayside Drive area. We're just having, I think about needs versus wants, right? And as much as I'd love to see Rockwood Park, and of course we just approved Dominion Park, that is definitely a want. When you have the fire department going out there all the time because of flooding, it's definitely a need. So any chance on getting any sort of things rectified out there? I'm not an engineer, so maybe there's another solution.
Who did you direct that to?
I don't know if it's Commissioner McGovern or Commissioner Hugenholtz might be actually the better person to answer.
I can chime in here initially, and anyone else feel free to chime in as well. Yeah, with respect to flooding in the Glen Falls area, that has been a long-standing matter, and the city has made investments over the years. One of the priorities that we see coming out of the climate adaptation plan relates to the causeway and doing work along there, really to shore up for future storms, but also to prevent the migration of water in from the bay. That's a longer term cost item. It's something we are mindful of and looking for, any opportunities relating to where we could leverage funding dollars there. And so putting in, for example, additional catch basins would not provide, would not alleviate flooding, because it's really Marsh Creek that fills up during high tide events. And then it takes some time until you have a tide change to actually drain that Marsh Creek system out into the Bay of Fundy.
I understand that, Commissioner McGovern, but is that the same problem with the flooding that we're getting on Bayside Drive? Is that also from Marsh Creek?
Yes, that does tie in. So partially, there's a couple of things. It is Marsh Creek. That is the drainage system for this area of the city. And so everything hinges upon the ability to allow that creek to drain, which of course at high tide, there's tidal gates in the causeway that close to prevent flooding in through this area. And so it's important that over time we shore up those tidal gates and renew that and raise it for future storm events. But the other part of it is indeed climate change as well. And I know we've had this discussion before in terms of rainfall intensity, that we're seeing higher intensities more frequently now. And actually on that point, the Atlantic guidelines for design engineers is actually being reviewed and updated at this time to account for those changes in climate change.
And actually, if I may, Your Worship, to the councillor, right now, based on council priorities and also the financial policies, flood mitigation, dealing with the various flood challenges that we have within the city, is many millions of dollars. And I can't even hazard a guess as to the total cost. Right now, based on our current policies, our direction is to fix the infrastructure we currently have and not take a look at it, addressing all these other issues. That said, it could change, but it would need to be a major course shift of council to go away from addressing our infrastructure deficit to put a higher priority on flood mitigation within the city when a good part of the city is challenged by it. That does not mean we have given up on it, not at all. But what we are trying to do is get more federal level money to assist with probable climate change adaptation funding for some of the examples of some of the areas that you've spoken about. But without major federal contribution and probably corresponding provincial contributions, for us to address it in a significant manner would mean a significant course change to council's direction and its own financial policies in the short term. And when I mean short term, I'm talking about the next few years.
Thank you, City Manager. Councillor Sullivan, did you want to wrap us up or are we good? Do you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Happy to wrap us up if there's no more questions from council, your worship. You know, I neglected to give the big thank you to all the staff that do all the work to put this together for us. So certainly CFO Fudge and his team, but capital budgets come from every corner of the organization and is a result of a whole lot of work from a whole lot of people. So thank you for that. I appreciate the conversation this evening around the table. Certainly one of the things I think we would strive for, and maybe as a conversation for a later date around the finance committee table, is how can we have longer conversations about capital? It is a tough conversation. I certainly understand, having had them for many years. Engineers are really good at planning out years in advance, and sometimes it's hard for council to see next year and the year after in order to get into those conversations of investing money for the long term. But it is a receive and file with more conversation to come. So I'm happy to have the vote, your worship.
Thank you. I'll just add to, just for the public, that with all your plans, instead of shelving them and developing new plans every council, those plans are set by a council, and they often we have to take them in bite pieces because we can't afford the whole thing. So you'll see a continuum of a lot of plans in there, and that just makes sense for us. The finance committee has gone through this budget with a fine-tooth comb. As you could tell from the way the finance committee chair spoke about it, I mean, he knows that budget inside and out. We've been through it. And there's lots of interesting things in there. I mean, it's trying to balance what we need and what we want and going forward with the money that we have. And Councillor Radwan brought up about the garbage, but if you want, and the flooding, and those two are linked, because garbage and decay is a huge for the GHGs. It's huge, and the whole objective with this new rollout of garbage is to get people to reduce their garbage. That's where we're going with that. There's a philosophical climate change impact, etc. with that. So anyways, with that, I will call the, I need a mover.
Your worship, it was moved. I'm not sure if you see Councillor Ogden has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Ogden, I don't, where are you? I don't even see you on my screen. Councillor Ogden, are you there?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. Do we have time to comment or just questions?
Sure, if you got a quick comment or a question.
Okay. I just want to thank city staff, our whole workforce. You know, I'm new to council. I've been around the community a long time, but this is a great staff, and it is extremely well run. I want people to know that in the last number of years, we've had our challenges, but it's not just city staff or City of St. John. We, for 55 years, we have not been able to keep the tax dollars that are generated in St. John, and we don't have the power over our university or building schools. We've only had one new school in 55 years. And we also lost 5,000 federal jobs in 8 different federal groups. And that has influenced our city negatively. But it is not the City of St. John, and the city is extremely well run, and I'm very pleased to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ogden. Always love to hear a little bit of positivity. So do we have a motion on the floor? Yeah, we do. Motion's already, it's getting so close to 10. On the question, all in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. All right. City clerk. What time is it?
I'm sorry.
Your worship, do you need a motion to move past 10 o'clock?
It's only 5:02.
And there's only one short item left. I think we'll do it, but Mayor, forgive me. We need to record the vote properly on the last one, and I just need to confirm, Councillor Radwan, you are a nay on the last motion?
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. City Clerk.
Yes, Your Worship. So if we feel we can finish in 4 minutes, we don't need a motion, but otherwise we need a motion to extend. The final item is 13.2. It's from the Finance Committee, a report entitled Internal Audit Services, and the Chair of Finance will give an.
Over to you, Councillor Sullivan.
Thanks, Your Worship. Internal Audit presented their plan to Finance Committee this past Thursday for the remainder of the 2021 year. That's what we have in front of us tonight. As a reminder, in July, we approved the Internal Audit Charter, which defined Council's authority and role. As part of our authority, it's Finance Committee's responsibility to recommend the Internal Audit Plan to Council for approval. For the remainder of the current year, Internal Audit has proposed a health and dental audit project. The objective of this project is as follows. It's to ensure that the health and dental plan provides the most effective benefits at the most efficient cost to employees and the city. Analyzing the benefit plan to ensure it is the right fit for our workforce is extremely important. It provides our people with the means to help them stay healthy and take care of their families, which ultimately helps our organization thrive. Our 2020 annual workforce report highlighted the fact that the group benefit costs exceeded contributions by approximately $250,000 over the last 3 years, and as such, a review is required to identify the best solution to stabilize these costs going forward. The investment in reviewing our plan to make sure it is the right fit will help us avoid unnecessary costs while ensuring we meet an appropriate standard of care to support our most valuable asset, our people. The budget being requested for this audit is for the contracted services of a third-party provider. The audit will be performed as a co-sourced relationship, and as such, there will be an internal team, which will include HR and finance, and the external team, which will be provided at a cost of up to $30,000. The external team will bring the expert ability to benchmark our organization against up to 50 other similar organizations, and this third party also has the ability to model the next 5 years as well. So the motion is Finance Committee recommends to Council to approve the 2021 Internal Audit Plan and approve that the city enter into an engagement letter agreement with Aon Hewitt Inc. to provide the services necessary to complete the internal audit project included in the plan.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll take a seconder on that. Seconded by Councillor Harris. On the question, it's pretty straightforward. All right, I'll ask, any questions? All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Councillor Harris. I need a seconder, Councillor Lowe.
Minute to spare.
On the excellent. On the question, all in favor? Contrary minded? Yes, I agree, Councillor Stewart. Motion carried. Thank you, team, and good night. It was a long night, but we got a lot of work done tonight, and there's a lot of exciting initiatives there. So thank you so much. Thank you to staff. Appreciate it. Good night, everyone.
9:59. Impressive, Your Worship. Wow.
Just squeaking in.